Hey, I'm Alex, and welcome to Hallucination. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. Story 1. My grandfather eats far too much. Now I understand why my father forbade me from seeing him. I always heard that asking about grandpa was forbidden. The moment I uttered the word grandfather, Dad would snap. His eyes darkened, his jaw clenched, and every time I heard the same thing. He's no longer part of this family. Period. I only saw grandpa twice as a child. I was too young to remember much, just fragments, the smell of charred meat, smoke curling from his pipe bowl, and a silence that clung to the air like wet wool. The only thing I recall clearly is how enormous he seemed whenever he visited, or maybe I was just too small. Mom would pull me away, quick and firm. When I turned 18 and moved to the city for college, I found myself digging through Dad's old things during a rare quiet moment. Among bills and expired driver's licenses, I discovered a yellowed envelope. Inside was a crumpled letter sent from a town called Lodell, a speck on the map, 2 hours north. The return address read George and Marilyn Arter. At first the names meant nothing, but George brought back the smell of smoke. Looking back now, I don't know why I went there, but I've always been curious, and something pulled me toward that place. Forbidden fruit is sweet, right? So during break, I decided to meet my grandfather. I rehearsed questions. Why he and Dad were estranged, what happened, but none of it would matter. Lodell was smaller than any town I'd seen. One gas station, one diner, one grocery store, and houses scattered along winding roads like fallen teeth. The last stretch from the bus stop, I walked. At the end of a gravel path, framed by bare trees and silence, stood a red wooden house. He opened the door before I could knock. "Good Lord Almighty," he boomed, grinning wide with crooked teeth. "Look who it is, my favorite grandson. God, it's good to see ya." Grandpa was massive. His frame barely fit the doorway. He wore a brown flannel shirt stretched over his gut, the collar stained, a thick pipe seemingly fused to his lips. His hug knocked the air out of me. Behind him stood Grandma. Her hair was neatly pinned, her sweater hanging loose, as if years of worry had whittled her down to bone. Her eyes met mine, and didn't match her smile. They said, "What have you done?" Grandpa ushered me inside, clapping my back so hard I stumbled. The house smelled of smoke, meat, and something coppery brown. The furniture was old but sturdy, the kind that outlives generations. He gave me a tour, laughing and gesturing wildly, and I sat with them in the living room, dark from heavy curtains. Grandma brought me tea with trembling hands. The first few days were tolerable. Grandpa joked, smoked non-stop, and taught me wood carving. He told stories to neighborhood kids who trickled in after school, 2 or 3 at a time. He was what people call the life of the party, and he really was. I don't know how to explain it, but Grandpa had this magnetism. People just gravitated toward him. He was kind, genuine, funny. His life stories were fascinating, and he clearly loved the attention, his pipe never leaving his mouth. Everything seemed normal, except for one thing: his appetite. He ate constantly. Bacon by the pound, bread by the loaf, pies in single sittings. Once I watched him devour an entire rotisserie chicken and a pan of cornbread before dinner. He chewed loudly, wheezing, sweating, never stopping. Plates piled around him like building blocks, yet he always wanted more. Licking plates, sucking grease from his fingers, gulping tea by the liter, nearly choking on it. Grandma brought out plates piled with pork chops, sausages, whole chickens, gravy boats the size of bowls, and he inhaled it all, groaning with pleasure. His face gleamed with grease. He didn't chew so much as engulf, as if tasting was optional. "You always eat like this?" I asked, half joking. He grunted around his pipe and patted his belly. "Big man needs big meals." I figured he just needed a lot of food, but not this much. All day he only ate and smoked. Barely able to move from his chair, just sitting in the kitchen waiting for the next massive meal. Hell, I don't think I've eaten as much in my life as he did in one dinner. Still, evenings with him were fun, until the hunger returned. One night, Grandma caught me alone in the hall while Grandpa snored like a bear in the next room. "You need to leave," she whispered, her face pale, lips cracked. While he's asleep. Tomorrow. First thing. But why? She flinched at the sound of heavy footsteps. Grandpa emerged from the shadows, pipe smoldering, eyes unreadable. Everything all right? Just telling him about my childhood. Grandma answered too quickly. Grandpa stared at us in silence, and for the first time I felt afraid. The only light was his burning pipe. The only sound, his labored breathing. He filled the hallway, his bulk swallowing the space. This house has many stories, he finally rumbled before retreating to bed. I barely slept that night between Grandpa's snoring and the dread gnawing at me. Leave in a hurry? But why? By morning, the fridge was empty. Grandpa sat at the table, licking his lips, breathing hard. Where's that woman gotten to? Starvin' over here. Grandma returned with 3 bulging grocery bags and frantically unpacked them, cooking while Grandpa fidgeted, growling incoherently. I claimed I wasn't hungry, a lie. Watching him eat, devouring even the gristle, made me nauseous. Instead, I went to the store, chewing on Grandma's warning. Something about this was starting to scare me, especially one thought. How does he eat so much? At his age, that obese chain smoking. How was his heart still beating? At the store, the clerk and a woman were whispering, tense, glancing at the windows. Ben's lost another pig, the woman muttered. 6-1. Coyote? Bear? The clerk asked vaguely. When's the last time you saw a coyote, let alone a bear around here? Sorry, I cut in awkwardly. Animals are disappearing. You new here, kid? The woman sighed, recalling something grim. First pigs, then goats, chickens, even dogs. What's left is just bones, gnawed, split open, like something sucked out the brains. But no one's seen an animal do it. No tracks, no blood. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I was drenched in sweat. They didn't know what could do this, but I might. And Grandpa? He still laughed, smoked, told stories. Evenings, he'd call me to the porch, where kids gathered like moths to his booming voice. One older girl, maybe 10, sat at his feet and asked, Mr. Arter, are you ever scared? He looked at her and smiled slowly. Only when the meat runs out, he said, laughing like it was a joke. The kids laughed too. I didn't. When I asked about the missing animals, Grandpa just chuckled through a mouthful of stew. Wild times, huh? Makes me feel young again. He played cards with me and the kids. Everyone adored him, but I grew uneasy around his bloated body, his yellow teeth grinning through smoke as he launched into another story. Too good, too vivid, too scary. The kids leaned in, wide-eyed, while Grandpa basked in their attention. Until Grandma, shaking, announced, We're out of food. Nothing left. No meat. No eggs. Not even flour. We can't. Find more, Grandpa growled, pupils shrinking to pins. I'm starvin'. He didn't move from his chair. Even when we went to bed, he stayed in the kitchen. Around 3 a.m., I woke up thirsty and flicked on the kitchen light, then nearly had a heart attack. Grandpa was still in his chair, trembling, staring at the same spot. His skin was pale, almost translucent, veins purple beneath. His pipe was gone. For the first time, I saw him without it, and that alone made me want to crawl into a corner. At first, I thought he was dead, but then he shook harder, sweat beading on his forehead. Grandpa, you okay? I whispered. Get me food, boy. His voice held no trace of the man I'd known. No warmth, just threat, something not human. Tell go to the store in the morning. Just sleep, Grandpa. Get me food. He didn't look up. I edged past him, turning off the light. All night, strange sounds came from below. Growls, wet slithering, the front door creaking. At dawn, Grandpa was gone, the door ajar. Grandma stood behind me, eyes red with fury and regret. Go, grandson, now. He won't be satisfied with store food. Pack your things and leave. But what's wrong with Grandpa? How can he eat so much? You don't want to know what happens when he stops eating. She turned to leave but froze at my next question. Why do you stay with him? If no one controls him, it gets much worse. That morning, the town buzzed with news. A boy had vanished overnight. Only bones were found, cleaned, not a scrap of meat left. No animal could done that. And I knew exactly what could. I returned to the house. Grandpa sat on the porch, pipe in teeth, smoke wreathing his head. His shirt was stained, worse than usual. He stared into nothing. Boy, he rasped, voice thick with smoke. Fetch me something from the store. Something was off that morning. His posture too rigid, eyes glassy, lips cracked, skin pale and swollen like raw meat. I mumbled an excuse and went to pack. Then I heard them arguing. "The kids are coming tonight," he snarled. "They want stories." "No," Grandma said. "Not this time. I'll call the police." You won't do shit." Then she screamed, not in fear, but rage. "I won't let you feed on them again." I backed away. I didn't want to know what that meant. Didn't want to see more. Dusk fell too fast. The kids arrived on foot, alone, drawn like moths. George waited on the porch, bloated, sweating, unable to rise. Blisters covered his hands. His jaw elongated. He still smiled, but not like before. Something inside him was pushing out. Grandma begged them to leave. "You don't understand," she wept. "This isn't a game. Go home. Please, Mrs. Arter. Just one story," the kids pleaded. "Get out, now," she hissed. "Let him be," Grandpa's voice growled from behind, making everyone jump. "Kids want stories." He shut the door after them. Grandpa swelled, grotesquely, glassy-eyed. He stared at them, his pipe forgotten. He didn't speak, couldn't stand. The kids giggled nervously in a semicircle. I watched, helpless, knowing something terrible was coming. "Mr. Arter," one child said, "don't tell our parents we came, okay? They banned us from going out, but we need your stories." "I won't tell," Grandpa gasped, clutching his chest. "Won't tell." Then I saw it. His shirt ripping, hands swelling, mouth unhinging wider than possible. He collapsed from his chair onto all fours. The kids screamed. So did I. His arms melted, fat dripping like candle wax. His distended belly dragged on the floor. Blisters erupted across his skin. God help me. His face slid into a wet, jagged grin of meat and fangs. Grandma stepped between him and the kids, gripping a fireplace poker, her eyes darting to me, "Run." "No more, George," she said. "If you want meat, take me." He didn't hesitate. One swift motion, her head vanished into his maw. The kids rushed the door, but it was locked. They pounded, shrieking. I stood frozen, praying this wasn't real. But it was. Grandpa, now a slithering mountain of hunger, gurgled, hissed, and dragged his bulk toward the children. I wish I could say I helped, but I couldn't. I vomited at the sounds, couldn't even look. Finally I moved, bolting to the attic, heart hammering. I stayed there, shaking, gasping as the house filled with the sounds of slaughter, chewing, crunching bones. One voice, then another, then silence. Sniffing, scratching, something huge lumbered down the hall, snuffling, muttering. I pressed into the rafters, too afraid to cry, hours stretched into centuries. Then a wet, slurping voice. "Boy, come back. Feed your grandpa. I smell you." I buried myself in dust and shadows, praying to disappear. I stayed until the silence returned, and dawn crept in. I crept downstairs, stepping over bones and blood. Grandpa was gone, only a greasy stain remained where he'd fallen. The house reeked of death. I vomited down my pants. Then I ran until the road turned to asphalt. Didn't stop, even at headlights. I told no one, not the police, not the townsfolk. I don't know what happened after, where Grandpa went. I returned home, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I vomited, cried, had nightmares of that night. Months later at breakfast, I met Dad's eyes and asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" He stared into his coffee. "I hoped you'd never go there," he said softly. "You weren't supposed to know that address. Guess blood calls to blood." "What does that mean?" He looked up, eyes bitter. "You're not my son." Silence fell like snow. "I mean, you are my son. I raised you. I love you, but you're not mine. George brought you as a baby, said he found you by the river. I didn't ask, didn't want to know, but your real parents. What happened to them?" He swallowed. "George got hungry. That's all you need to know. And you, how did you live with him?" "We moved town to town, keeping him fed, but it was never enough. When I was 16, we settled in Lodell. A month later, he brought you. I escaped with you. He stayed for 18 years. Now I live with that truth. Try to forget, but some nights I wake tasting ash and smoke. I hear news reports, missing animals, missing people. I lock the windows. The guilt eats me alive. Those kids. I knew. I could be stopped it. Could be spoken up. But I was scared. And that, like the nightmares, will haunt me forever. Story 2. I took my friend to the ER late at night. I don't think we were in the real hospital anymore. It was past midnight when Chris and I left the old 24-hour diner at the edge of town. We had spent the evening catching up over burgers and coffee, talking about high school memories and future plans that would likely never materialize. As we strolled toward my car parked a little further down the block, Chris slowed his pace. I glanced over and noticed him rubbing his temples. He was pale. "Everything okay, man?" I asked, half-jokingly. "Too much greasy diner food?" Chris shook his head, wincing as he leaned against a nearby lamppost. "No, it's different," he mumbled. "Everything's spinning," he grimaced, clutching his stomach as he swayed on his feet. I rushed over and grabbed him by the arm just as his legs gave out. His breathing was ragged, each breath shallow and strained. A jolt of panic shot through me. I wasn't sure what was happening, but it was more than just a bad burger. "Come on," I said, guiding him toward the car. "We need to get you to the hospital." We barely made it to the passenger seat before he collapsed completely. I managed to push him inside, buckling his seatbelt as his head lolled against the window. His breathing had grown faint, his skin cold. I didn't waste any more time. I jumped into the driver's seat and sped toward the hospital. The roads were empty, the entire town blanketed in a pale bluish light that made everything look strangely surreal. When the hospital finally came into view, I pulled up to the emergency entrance and skidded to a stop. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, and I half-dragged, half-carried Chris inside. The bright fluorescent lights inside the emergency room burned my eyes as I shouted for help. A nurse and a security guard rushed over immediately. Chris was placed on a gurney and whisked away into a triage room. I tried to follow, but the nurse held up a hand. "You need to stay in the waiting room, sir. Someone will come speak to you soon." Reluctantly, I turned back and made my way into the waiting room. It was a small, uninviting space lined with rows of faded plastic chairs. The harsh lighting overhead buzzed like a hive of angry bees, casting a cold, sterile glow over everything. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, with a hint of something stale like old coffee or cheap hospital food. The reception desk sat at the far end of the room, cluttered with stacks of paperwork and a dusty computer monitor. Behind the desk, a tired-looking receptionist typed away with little enthusiasm, barely glancing up as I entered. She looked like she had been working the night shift for years, with deep shadows under her eyes and a weary slump in her posture. A glass partition separated her from the waiting area, with a small sliding window used to speak to patients. Aside from the receptionist, there were only a few other people scattered around the room. A middle-aged man in a wrinkled jacket sat slumped in a chair, staring blankly at the floor tiles, his face pale and drawn. Across from him, a young woman scrolled through her phone, her foot tapping rhythmically against the leg of the chair. In the far corner, an elderly woman with a hunched back knitted quietly, her lips moving as she murmured to herself, though I couldn't make out the words. The wall-mounted TV flickered above, showing a muted news broadcast with closed captions scrolling across the screen. Next to it, a clock ticked irregularly, the second hand jerking with each movement as though struggling to keep time. The room itself seemed caught in some liminal state. I chose a seat near the corner, trying to calm my breathing. My heart was still racing from the rush to the hospital. The seat beneath me was stiff and uncomfortable, offering little relief from the tension gripping my body. I shifted, trying to find a better position, when I felt something crinkle under my leg. Frowning, I reached down and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper that had been wedged into the chair. It was old and yellowed at the edges, like it had been left there for a while. Curious, I unfolded the paper and smoothed it out on my lap. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, as if whoever wrote it had been in a hurry or panicked. The list was numbered, and as I began to read, I couldn't help but feel a mix of surprise and amusement at what was written there. Rule 1. Avoid making eye contact with the receptionist between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. I raised an eyebrow. That seemed oddly specific. Why would anyone write something like that? I glanced over at the receptionist, who was still tapping away at her keyboard, oblivious to the rest of the room. Was this some kind of prank? The idea made me smirk a little, despite the heaviness in the air. Rule 2. Never walk past the reception desk without greeting the receptionist after 2:30 a.m. I let out a short, dry laugh. So I'm supposed to be polite now? I muttered under my breath, shaking my head. It was all so ridiculous. Maybe someone had written this as a joke to mess with the people stuck here at odd hours. bored out of their minds. I could imagine some bored night shifter scribbling out these rules as a way to pass the time. Rule 3. If a visitor arrives asking for directions, do not help them. I paused. That one was strange. It carried a different weight compared to the others. Who wouldn't help someone lost in a hospital, of all places? Rule 4. You hear your friend's voice calling from down the hallway, do not leave the waiting room to look for them. The amusement drained from my expression. I felt a chill run up my spine, as if the temperature in the room had just dropped a few degrees. I glanced toward the dimly lit hallway that led to the ER rooms. It seemed to stretch into darkness. I shook my head, pushing the thought away. This list was just some random nonsense, wasn't it? I continued reading, my curiosity now tinged with unease. Rule 5. If a power outage occurs, stay seated and do not move. Rule 6. If a door that should be locked is found open, close it immediately and do not look inside. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I couldn't explain why, but each rule seemed to grow darker, more foreboding as I read on. It wasn't just the content of the rules, it was the way they were written, as if someone were trying to warn me. Rule 7. Do not look through the glass doors leading to the courtyard after 4 a.m. Rule 8. If you feel a sudden chill, do not look over your shoulder. That one made me swallow hard. There was something inherently unsettling about the thought of a chill creeping up on you from behind, and not being able to turn around to see what or who might be there. I couldn't help but glance behind me, but there was nothing there. Just the same sterile room, with its faded chairs and buzzing lights. I reached the last rule, and for some reason my heart beat a little faster. Rule 9. If a security guard tells you it's time to leave, check the clock before listening. It's safe to leave after 6 a.m. My gaze flicked up to the wall-mounted clock, its second hand twitching with every tick. It read 1:30 a.m. At the bottom of the paper, written in shaky red ink, were the words, "Trust me." I learned the hard way. There was a dark, crusted stain on the corner, one that looked disturbingly like dried blood. The sight of it made my stomach twist. I rubbed my fingers over the words, feeling the rough texture of the ink beneath my skin. I couldn't help but let out a short, nervous laugh. What kind of place is this? I whispered to myself. I slumped back in the chair. It was hard to shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, but I forced myself to dismiss it as a weird prank. The list couldn't actually mean anything, just someone's twisted idea of a joke. I leaned my head back against the wall and closed my eyes, trying to calm my thoughts. A part of me couldn't stop thinking about Chris and the way he had collapsed in the parking lot. The quiet hum of the waiting room wrapped itself around me, making the place feel even more isolating. That's when I heard it, my name, spoken in a low, barely audible voice that seemed to drift down the hallway. Adam, Adam. My eyes shot open, and my body tensed. The voice was unmistakable. It was Chris. I jerked my head towards the corridor leading to the ER rooms, but there was no one in sight, just the pale overhead lights flickering. The voice came again, a little louder this time. Adam, help me. I jumped up from the chair, the sound of my name sending shivers down my spine. My feet were already moving before I realized it. I took a few steps into the hallway. I glanced back at the waiting area, now a few steps behind me. The other visitors, still scattered about, seemed completely unaware, oblivious to the voice echoing down the hall. Adam. Chris' voice was more desperate now, laced with pain. I took another step down the hallway, my footsteps echoing against the floor. As I walked deeper into the corridor, the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder, some of them flickering out completely, leaving long stretches of darkness. The ER rooms lined the sides of the hallway, their doors slightly ajar. I hesitated as I reached one of the open doorways. I peered inside and immediately wished I hadn't. There, standing in the center of the dimly lit room, was a man in a patient's gown, facing me. The man's head moved in quick, jerking motions, shaking from side to side so rapidly that I couldn't make out any details. It was just a blur, a sickening blur. Then, without warning, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and I stumbled back in shock. My breathing grew shallow as I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen, but there was no time to process it. Chris' voice came again, further down the hallway. Adam, please. I pushed forward, forcing myself to continue. The unsettling darkness around me seemed to press in from all sides. I came across another room, the door half open. Inside I could see a doctor standing over a patient, his back hunched as he examined something on the table. The doctor wore a white lab coat and surgical mask, his features obscured, but there was something off about the way he moved. His motions were robotic. Then I noticed the tool in his hand, a bone saw. He raised it slowly, the harsh metal glinting under the dim light, and then I heard a gut-wrenching scream from the patient on the table. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall behind me, my eyes wide with terror. When I looked back into the room, it was empty. There was no doctor, no patient, just a dark, vacant space. My hands trembled as I rubbed my face, trying to snap out of whatever hallucination I was trapped in. This can't be real, I whispered to myself, but the corridor seemed to stretch endlessly ahead of me, and Chris' voice continued to call out, drawing me further in. As I turned the next corner, I froze. There, hanging in the doorway of a nearby room, was a mass of dark hair, long and tangled, spilling down from just beyond the doorframe. It looked like someone was standing behind the door, peeking around the corner. A single eye, black as pitch, stared directly at me from the darkness. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The figure remained there, still and silent, just watching me. I took a slow step forward, and then the eye pulled back into the shadows, disappearing from view. The hallway was deathly quiet, save for the low hum of the lights. I forced myself to move past the doorway, my pulse hammering in my ears. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the figure again, just around the corner of the room, her head unnaturally high, as if she were crouched against the ceiling. I could see more of her this time, her elongated arms stretched out, the bony hand reaching towards me. Before I could react, the hand brushed my shoulder, cold and corpse-stiff, its fingers scratched into my skin like claws. I bolted, my shoes squeaking on the linoleum as I raced down the hallway. I had no idea where I was going. I just wanted to get away from whatever that thing was. I threw open the first door I saw and stumbled back into the waiting room. My heart pounded in my chest as I staggered to a stop. Everything appeared normal again. The reception desk, the plastic chairs, the other visitors who hadn't moved an inch. It was as if none of it had happened, but my skin prickled with the lingering touch of that hand. Glancing at my shoulder, I noticed 3 faded scratch marks, a reminder that something was very, very wrong. I slumped back into a chair, catching my breath, trying to make sense of the nightmare I had just experienced. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled list of rules, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. I glanced at Rule 4 again, the words seeming to taunt me. If you hear your friend's voice calling from down the hallway, do not leave the waiting room to look for them. I had ignored it, and now I was starting to believe that those rules weren't a joke after all. I tried to calm myself, my breathing coming in short, ragged gasps as I leaned back in the chair. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to force myself to think rationally. Maybe I was just sleep-deprived, or maybe the stress of seeing Chris collapse was catching up to me. I told myself that I had only imagined the things I saw in the hallway, but no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, the feeling of that cold hand brushing against my skin lingered. I glanced at the clock, 1:45 a.m. The minutes seemed to crawl by. I couldn't shake the dread that had settled in my chest. My thoughts drifted back to the list of rules. Each one seemed ridiculous on its own. But after my experience in the hallway, I found myself paying closer attention to each word. That was when I noticed him, a man who hadn't been in the room before. He stood near the entrance, his hands stuffed into the pockets of his long coat, his eyes scanning the waiting room like he was searching for someone. His presence sent a jolt of unease through me. I was sure he hadn't been there earlier. I would have remembered his tall, lanky figure and the unsettling way his gaze seemed to linger on the other visitors, one by one. The list. I pulled it from my pocket and read the 3rd rule again. If a visitor arrives asking for directions, do not help them. The man's gaze found me, and he started walking toward where I sat. My body stiffened, every muscle tensing involuntarily. There was no mistaking his intention. He stopped a few feet away, leaning slightly forward, as though inspecting me. "Excuse me," he said in a voice that was calm but too deliberate. "Could you help me find the ICU? I seem to be a little lost." The tone of his voice was polite enough, but there was something off about it, something that put me on edge. It was as though he was trying to mimic normal speech but wasn't quite getting it right. I glanced around the waiting room, but no one else seemed to notice the man's presence. The receptionist didn't even look up. I shook my head, gripping the list tighter in my hand. "I'm sorry. I can't help you," I stammered. The man didn't move. He just kept staring at me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice growing softer, almost coaxing. "It won't take but a moment. It's just down the hall, right?" I didn't know what to say. A part of me felt guilty for not helping him, but the words on the list kept flashing in my mind. "Do not help them." I forced myself to look away, hoping he would take the hint and leave, but instead he took a step closer. "It's not very kind to ignore someone who needs help," he said, his tone now edged with something darker. I glanced at his face, and for a split second, his features seemed to shift. His mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin, the kind that didn't belong on a human face. The corners of his lips seemed to extend too far, the teeth behind them slightly jagged. I shot up from my chair, stumbling backward. The man's smile didn't waver as he turned his head slightly, like he was examining me from a different angle. Then he turned towards the reception desk and started walking, slowly and unnatural. At one point, his head snapped towards me, unnaturally, the same grin on his face. As he continued walking, I froze. I couldn't look away. Then, as he reached the reception desk, he just passed through it, and then he suddenly disappeared. My gaze darted around the waiting room. The other visitors were still exactly where they had been moments ago, their expressions unchanged, their movements as mechanical as before. I glanced back at the receptionist. She was still at her desk, her face illuminated by the pale glow of the computer screen. My gaze flickered up to the clock on the wall. It was 1:58 a.m., and Rule 1 flashed in my mind. Avoid making eye contact with the receptionist between 2 a.m. and 2:30 a.m. After a few minutes, I glanced toward her, my eyes drifting out of habit. It was just for a second. The receptionist was staring straight at me, her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. She wasn't moving. It was as if she'd been waiting for this moment. I tore my gaze away, my pulse quickening. As I turned my head, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed her get up from her chair, her movements oddly stiff, as though her joints didn't bend the right way. She walked forward, but not around the reception desk. She passed through it, like it wasn't even there. I froze, not daring to look directly at her again. I squeezed my eyes shut. I felt the air grow colder, the chill pressing against my skin. It felt as if she were getting closer. I could hear the faintest rustle of fabric, the light creak of footsteps on the floor growing louder with each passing second. "Don't look. Just don't look," I told myself, my hands gripping the edges of the chair. I sat there, tense and unmoving, my eyes squeezed shut as if I could will her away by sheer force of will. Then everything went still. The room fell into an unnatural quiet, the buzz of the fluorescent lights the only sound left to ground me in reality. I opened my eyes slowly, half expecting to see her standing inches away from me, her face contorted into something inhuman. But the receptionist was back at her desk, looking down at the monitor, her posture as unbothered as if she hadn't moved at all. The other people in the waiting room seemed unchanged, as though nothing unusual had happened. I glanced at the clock, 2:40 a.m. A wave of relief washed over me, my shoulders sagging as the tension finally started to leave my body. I forced myself to my feet, my legs still shaky beneath me. I couldn't just sit there, feeling like a trapped animal. I needed to move, to clear my head. As I got up to walk around the room, I remembered Rule 2, never walk past the reception desk without greeting the receptionist after 2:30 a.m. I wasn't about to take any more chances. I turned toward the receptionist and gave her a nod, trying to keep my voice steady. Hi," I mumbled awkwardly. She didn't look up, didn't react at all, just continued to type away on the keyboard. I took that as a good sign and began walking a slow circle around the waiting room, forcing myself to stay calm, to pretend that everything was normal. The chill in the air hadn't entirely left. As I walked, I could feel a subtle shift in the temperature, a lingering cold that seemed to follow me. The overhead lights flickered faintly, casting brief shadows along the walls, giving the impression that the room was expanding and contracting with each pulse. As I rounded the corner, I felt the presence behind me, something that wasn't there before. I didn't hear footsteps, but I sensed it nonetheless, like the weight of unseen eyes pressing against my back. It was close, just out of reach. My instinct was to turn and look, to confront whatever was creeping up behind me, but I clenched my jaw and kept my gaze forward, remembering Rule 8. If you feel a sudden chill, do not look over your shoulder. I walked faster, my pulse quickening as the chill seemed to grow stronger with every step. The lights buzzed louder, the flickering more erratic. I felt something brush against the back of my neck, cold and light, like a breath. I didn't stop until I reached the chairs again, sinking into one with a shuddering breath. The presence faded, though the air remained icy, and I rubbed my hands together to warm them. I glanced back toward the reception desk, half expecting to see the receptionist watching me again, but she remained focused on her monitor, her face lit by the soft glow of the screen. I leaned back in the chair, my heart still racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, that the rules on that crumpled piece of paper weren't just random scribbles left behind to scare people. Whatever game I'd found myself in, it wasn't a joke, and now the only way out seemed to be playing along. I sat there for a long moment, my body trembling, trying to calm my nerves and slow my breathing. That's when I heard the automatic doors slide open with a soft hiss. I looked up, expecting to see another late-night visitor or a nurse making rounds, but my heart almost stopped when I saw who stepped inside. It was Chris. He looked perfectly fine, normal. His face had color, his clothes were clean. There wasn't a single sign that anything had been wrong with him. Relief rushed through me, and I felt the tension in my muscles finally ease. Chris' eyes found mine, and he broke into a small smile as he walked over. "Hey, Adam," he said casually, his voice the same as always. "They let me out early." The relief was so overwhelming that I laughed out loud. "Chris, man, you scared the hell out of me," I said, shaking my head. "Are you sure you're okay? You looked pretty bad earlier." He shrugged, giving a dismissive wave of his hand as he settled into the chair next to me. "Yeah, I'm fine now. Whatever it was, I guess it passed. They ran a few tests and said there was nothing serious." He flashed that familiar grin, the one I'd seen 1,000 times. "Guess I'm just too stubborn to stay sick." As we talked, something in the back of my mind itched. There was an unsettling quality to the conversation, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Chris was acting normal, too normal. He was speaking in a calm, deliberate tone, his words perfectly measured. I brushed it off, figuring it was just my nerves playing tricks on me after everything that had happened tonight. Still, as Chris continued to talk, a strange sense of déjà vu settled over me. It was as if the conversation was looping back on itself, repeating the same phrases. His voice had the same rhythm, the same inflection, almost like a recording on a loop. Suddenly, I turned to see a nurse walking briskly down the hallway, pushing a gurney. My stomach dropped when I saw who was lying on it. Chris. He was unconscious, hooked up to a heart monitor, an oxygen mask over his face. My gaze darted back to the seat next to me, but the chair was empty. The Chris who had been sitting beside me was gone, vanished as though he'd never been there at all. My skin prickled as a wave of cold panic spread through me. I stared at the empty chair for a long moment, my heart pounding in my ears. Then I saw the nurse walking by the waiting room. She glanced over at me briefly, her expression neutral. I jumped up from my chair. "Wait," I called after her. "Is Chris okay? My friend, he was just sitting here. What's going on?" The nurse slowed, turning to look at me with a small, tight-lipped smile. "Your friend is stable," she said, "but he hasn't woken up yet." Her words hung in the air, leaving me cold and confused. I glanced back at the empty seat, then at the nurse, as she continued down the ER hallway. My head was spinning. Had Chris really been here, or had I just imagined him? I sank back into my chair, my body heavy with fatigue and fear. I glanced at the clock again, 3 a.m. Time was moving, but not in the way it should have. I felt trapped, as though the minutes were pulling me further into the unknown. I pulled the crumpled list of rules from my pocket and unfolded it with trembling hands, my eyes scanning the lines again, looking for answers that weren't there. I needed to understand what was happening to me, what was happening in this place. But the rules only deepened the mystery, the words twisting in my mind like a riddle I couldn't solve. Time seemed to move strangely now. I couldn't tell how long I had been sitting in that chair, how long I had been wandering the room. The clock above seemed to skip minutes or stall entirely, and my sense of reality continued to blur. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the fatigue that clung to me like a shroud. I glanced at the clock again. It showed 5:55 a.m. Almost there, I thought. Almost free. That was when a security guard appeared in the doorway, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the waiting room floor. He was a broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed mustache and a calm, almost reassuring presence. He walked toward me with an easy stride and stopped just a few feet away. "Sir, it's time to leave," he said in a deep, measured voice. "The ER is closing for non-patient visitors." I blinks, my thoughts catching up slowly. But my friend Chris is still... Just then, I saw Chris walking out of the ER hallway. He waved to me, a tired but genuine smile on his face. Relief flooded through me and I started to get up, then hesitated. The words from Rule 9 echoing in my head. If a security guard tells you it's time to leave, check the clock before listening. I turned my gaze toward the clock above the reception desk. 6:01 a.m. My shoulders sagged in relief. I was finally free of this place. I nodded and followed the security guard toward the exit, Chris walking beside me. As we stepped out into the cool morning air, I felt like I could finally breathe again. We got into my car, and I started the engine. I felt a small smile tug at my lips. I pulled out of the hospital parking lot, the tension in my chest slowly beginning to fade. But as I drove, a strange unease crept over me. The world outside the car windows seemed darker than it should have been. I glanced at the sky. It was still a deep, inky black with no trace of the early morning light. It was too dark, too quiet. I squinted, peering between the trees lining the road, and my heart skipped a beat. In the shadows, I saw faint figures standing there, their forms barely visible, distorted as if they were made of mist. Panic surged through me. I glanced at the dashboard clock, and my stomach dropped. 4:30 a.m. How was that possible? It had been well past 6 a.m. when we left the hospital. I turned to look at Chris in the passenger seat, my heart pounding in my ears. But it wasn't Chris. There was a shadow there, sitting beside me. Its form was a vague silhouette, its face obscured, but I could feel it watching me, feel its eyes boring into my skin. I gasped, my grip on the steering wheel tightening as my vision blurred with fear. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt in the middle of the road. Suddenly, I was back in the waiting room, seated in the same stiff plastic chair. The security guard stood in front of me, a grin spreading slowly across his face, his eyes unnaturally wide and gleaming in the harsh fluorescent light. "Time to leave," he said again, his voice echoing in my head like a taunt. I felt my mind start to unravel. Had I ever left the hospital at all? Was I trapped here, destined to relive these twisted events over and over again? I buried my face in my hands, my breathing ragged as a sense of hopelessness washed over me. It felt like hours passed, but it could have been minutes, or even seconds. I didn't know anymore. I was dimly aware of a nurse standing in front of me, her voice calm and soothing, pulling me back from the edge. "Sir, your friend is stable," she said gently. "He's going to be okay, but he needs rest. He'll be transferred to a hospital room soon, and you can visit him during regular visiting hours." I looked up at her, my vision clearing slowly. The waiting room was just as it had been. No sign of the security guard or anything out of the ordinary. I glanced at the clock. It read 6:30 a.m., and a soft glow of morning sunlight filtered through the glass doors, filling the room with a warm light. The nightmare was over. I nodded to the nurse, murmuring my thanks, and stumbled out of the ER, the cool morning air a welcome relief. As I reached my car, I glanced back at the hospital, half expecting to see something out of place. But it looked like any other hospital in the early light, mundane and unthreatening. I got in the car and drove home, the sun finally rising to chase away the last remnants of darkness. Later that day, I returned to the hospital to visit Chris. He was awake, sitting up in bed and looking surprisingly well for someone who had collapsed so suddenly the night before. "Hey," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I pulled a chair up to his bedside. "How are you feeling?" Chris chuckled weakly. "Better than I should, I guess," he replied. "But I had the weirdest dreams last night. It was like I was half conscious the whole time." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of dreams?" Chris frowned, his brow furrowing as he tried to recall. "One of them was, I came in the ER and saw you sitting in the waiting room. You looked pretty freaked out. And then there was another one. We were leaving the hospital together, just driving away into the night." A cold shiver ran down my spine, but I forced a smile and nodded. "Yeah, weird," I said quietly, my mind racing with the memory of the night's events. As we sat there talking, I glanced at my shoulder, where a constant pain kept tugging at me, and saw the 3 scratch marks from last night. I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there in the darkness of the night I had just escaped, something was still waiting, and the rules of this place would not be so easily forgotten. Story 3. I thought someone at work was stealing my lunch. I was very, very wrong. So I'm just a regular guy, your coworker, your roommate, your weekend hiking buddy. I had a good job, a boring but healthy routine, and a manageable case of the Sunday scaries living in a big city. Or I was that guy. Now I'm starving, and nothing I do can stop it. I used to care about my health more than anything. My dad has cancer. My mom struggles with her mind. I figured my best shot at avoiding either was keeping my body clean, so I ate simple oats and eggs for breakfast, lean meat for lunch, rice and chicken for dinner. Boring, maybe, but I believed in it. Was I jacked? Not even close. I'd sneak in some late-night Uber Eats or a pizza at work, and I loved grabbing a few pints after a good hike. I'd climbed most of the New Hampshire 4,000 footers, but weekend hiking doesn't build a six-pack. I was just a classic weekend warrior. Anyway, one weekend I convinced my newlywed friends Patrick and Rachel to join me on a short trail, 3 miles out and back, barely any elevation. Easy. They invited their friend Emma, who I'd met a couple of times at potlucks. Emma was chill, friendly, social, and she made this dangerously good mac and cheese. At one potluck, my kimchi dumplings got completely ignored while everyone scraped the last bits of her dish out of the tray. I had to know why. "Emma," I asked, "why won't anyone eat my dumplings?" She smiled and said, "Let me try one." I grabbed a chopstick and held one up. As I moved it toward her mouth, her smile dropped. She grabbed my wrist. "What's in this?" she asked. "Kimchi." A strange silence fell over the room. Rachel looked horrified. "Don't you know Emma's allergic to pickles?" "A pickle allergy? Never heard of that before." After that potluck and the hike, Emma and I started talking more. Eventually, we got together. It didn't happen overnight. There were a few long conversations about her going back to her exchange town in Europe, about her anxiety and insomnia, but she was easy to talk to, fun to be around. It worked. Things were great. We did all the typical couple stuff, drinks, movies, ceramics classes, even a few hikes together. Honestly, I was surprised at how easily she kept up on some of the steeper inclines. Then something changed. After one hike, we grabbed burgers. I couldn't finish mine, so I offered it to her. "Are you sure?" she said. "I don't want to get hurt again." "Over a burger?" I asked. "You wouldn't understand," she said, locking eyes with me. "You sure you want to share your food with me? There's no turning back." I laughed. "It's all yours." She devoured that burger and fries like she hadn't eaten in days. It was the first time I ever saw her eat something I didn't prep. At the time, I thought nothing of it. But the next week, my meal prep containers at work started showing up nearly empty. My turkey breast, gone. The cod I cooked Sunday night, mostly eaten, with just a few neat bites left. I figured someone at work was stealing my food, so I filled a container with blue paint and left it in the fridge as bait. No one opened the fridge all day, no paint on anyone's hands, but when I checked later, the container was empty, clean, every drop gone. That's when I started getting scared. Back home, things got worse. I'd crack eggs and find only shells. My overnight oats would vanish overnight. Rice would turn to smoke in the pressure cooker. Meat would deflate when I touched it with a fork. Protein bars from the store came in empty wrappers. Emma started complimenting my physique, telling me I looked lean. I didn't mention what was happening. I figured her anxiety didn't need the extra weight. I tried eating out, placed a $100 delivery order. Mine arrived completely empty. I went apple picking. Every apple was hollowed out like Swiss cheese. I was out of energy and retreating to my room more and more. Emma said I should eat more, that I was probably just hiking too much. I couldn't tell if she was pretending not to notice, or if she genuinely didn't know. Weeks passed. I lost so much weight, I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror. If my mother had seen me, she'd have burst into tears. I still had the frozen kimchi from that first potluck, so I decided to make dumplings again, for Rachel and Patrick's fall get-together. I was a skeleton by then. My wrists had thinned, my eyes had sunk, and my chest felt like it could fold in half. Emma said I looked disciplined, that maybe I was finally reaping the rewards of clean eating. That night I made the dumplings and went to bed. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to coughing from the kitchen. Strange, because all the lights had been off when I went to sleep. I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound. The coughing wasn't from an adult. It sounded like a child, wet, raspy, weak. As I turned the corner, I saw her. Emma. But not the Emma I knew. Her skin was blotched with red hives. She was hunched over the freezer, kimchi dumpling in hand. Her eyes met mine. "You didn't tell me they had pickles," she said. Then she screamed. Her body erupted in flames. It wasn't like a kitchen fire. It was light, heat, force. She stayed upright, shrieking, her mouth frozen in agony as the flames consumed her. The heat pushed me back. When it stopped, she was gone. Just a blackened silhouette on the floor. That was the last time I saw her. But it didn't end there. Food still disappears. Always. Except the kimchi. It's the only thing left untouched. I eat it when I can, but it's not enough. I'm wasting away. I don't have the energy to work or leave my room. If you message me next week, I probably won't be here. I see them at night, shadows moving in the kitchen, shapes near the office fridge, slithers of motion just out of view. Whatever they are, they feed when I'm not looking. If you have any high-calorie meals with kimchi, send them my way. Before it's too late. Story 4. My wife underwent exposure therapy to cure her arachnophobia, but it worked too well and now she's freaking me out. I don't like spiders. I don't like it when they bunch themselves up so their legs look like tangled wires, and I don't like it when they spread themselves out like the radial spokes on a wheel. It was bad luck that when I met my wife, we discovered we were both scared of them. As the man, I kinda just wound up taking over spider killing duty. At first this meant squealing while trying to lob a shoe at one of them from a distance, but as the years went on I kinda just got tired of the stress and anxiety. Fear is exhausting, so is the pageantry of it. Jumping up and shouting and lots of running around. Over time I found myself having less and less of a fear reaction to them. Don't get me wrong, I didn't want one crawling on my face, but it wasn't like they had me running away in fear every time. Lily was never great with them either, but it wasn't what I'd call worthy of therapy. For the first 10 years I knew her, she was a fairly run-of-the-mill arachnophobe. Things only got bad after this one night, when we'd just come back in from an evening with friends. There had been a storm outside, windy as hell. I remember putting the keys down on the table by the door, and when I looked back she was pulling down the hood of her coat. She let out a sigh, ran her hands through her hair, and she looked a little puzzled by what Shed felt. When she lifted her hand away, there were thin black legs poking out from between her fingers. It took a second for her to react to what was all bunched up inside her cupped hand, then she screamed and threw it onto the ground. I saw it for only a second, it was so fast. Then it was off and under the nearest door, and my number one concern became comforting my wife, who was having a full-blown panic attack. "Get it off! Get it off!" she screamed while slapping at her neck and hair. I hugged her tight, checked her hair, and then checked it again when she asked me to. Then she stripped her top off to make sure nothing else was clinging to her clothes, before I took her into the kitchen and we had a cup of tea while she kept scratching at the back of her head. "Little fucker," she half cried, half laughed. "I can't believe it. Did you see it? It was huge." "One of the biggest yet," I said. Truthfully, I only had half-glimpsed memories of it scuttling away, but it had been big. Large enough that a pint glass wouldn't have fit over its darting legs. Just seeing it had left me feeling anxious. But at the time, I ignored my own discomfort. After all, I'd hardly been the real victim. "And it got away," she cringed. "Oh God, it's still in this house somewhere, isn't it?" I wanted to lie, but thought better of it. "Somewhere, yeah," I said. "But we'll spider-proof the bedroom tonight, and I'll go looking in the morning." "Thank you," she smiled mournfully. "Jesus, I just know I'm gonna have a hard time sleeping tonight." She made me strip the bed before she got in it, and all night she kept flicking at her fringe and the hair on the back of her neck. I felt so bad for her. If that had been me, I can't say I would have reacted much better. Neither of us slept that well, but I was mostly just worried about her. When you love someone, it's tough to see them suffer. But it wasn't just that one night. The second one was much the same. The third, fourth, and so on. It petered out a little in the second week. But then she saw a spider on some TV show and the anxiety came back full force. Every night was the same. I had to strip the bed of everything, lift the mattress, and check for spiders. She even got rid of her bedside table so there would be less hiding places for one. In the meantime, I was on hunting duty. In her own words, I had to find the bastard or Shed never feel safe in that house again. It's funny, but in hindsight I can't really say what I saw go scuttling under the doorway that first night, but I do know I didn't try all that hard to find it. I remember finding some webs under the living room sofa that were real odd. The fibers were thick, like the fake stuff they bring out on Halloween, and I had to peel them off the carpet like Velcro. I found a couple of these nests throughout the house, but I never mentioned them. One of them hid a hole in the floor that really should have alarmed me, but I just ignored it. I ignored a lot, actually. I found dead mice spun up in cocoons, and something bore a hole through one of the kitchen cupboards and filled it with silk. Nothing normal about that, but I just covered it up with some cans and moved on. A behavior I find hard to explain in hindsight. Maybe my attention was elsewhere. Lily wasn't in a great place, and she was slowly getting worse. She cried a lot, and any little thing that touched her skin would result in lots of panicked yelling. She couldn't eat a meal without slapping at her arms and neck every few seconds. Things got real bad when I came back one night to find her shaving her head. She told me she got tired of mistaking the feeling of her own hair for a spider, so this was the simplest way to feel clean and safe. If you ever lived with anyone who's had a breakdown, there's usually this moment where your heart sinks as you realize that what you're dealing with has transcended the norm. It's quite frightening, actually. Reminded me of when my mom found a lump. It's a very isolating sort of fear. I remember lying awake in bed that night and just thinking about how I'd found Lily bent over the bath, shaver in hand, with a patchy head like that doll from Toy Story. When she looked over her shoulder at me, she smiled, and her eyes were so wide I felt like I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. Have you ever missed someone while you still live with them? Made them coffee and breakfast and chatted about your day, but it's like nobody's there. Every day was the same. I tell her about work, and she'd tell me about how she'd scrubbed the bedroom top to bottom looking for spiders or started pulling up the bathroom tiles to check for nests. At one point I realized she'd taken a lot of time off work, but she wouldn't give me a straight answer, so I had to call her office. They wouldn't even answer my calls, which I had to take as a pretty bad sign. It came as a relief when she got sectioned. Everything came out all at once. She'd tried putting a hammer to one of the walls to find what was behind it, not realizing that it was just the neighbor's living room on the other side. I was at work during all this, but things clearly escalated pretty quickly, and the police arrived to find a partially bald woman screaming about spiders in the walls. By the time I got home, they'd already taken her to be assessed at the local hospital. I rushed to visit her, but in the meantime I had to call her parents, and it was a relief because I wasn't alone anymore. Other people knew what was going on, and that made it a little easier for me to navigate. Until then, I'd been afraid to mention it to anyone. I guess I was a little embarrassed, or maybe just not sure what the etiquette was for discussing someone else's mental health. She was only gone about a night, not even 12 hours really. The neighbors agreed not to press charges if I paid for all the repairs, and Lily got therapy. Lily's parents are quite well off, so they helped us out with that. They found this clinic that she stayed at for a couple of weeks. It specialized in exposure therapy, which really just means getting a person used to their phobia. Don't like water? Spend hours every day in a pool. Don't like moths? Step into a room with thousands of them. This is oversimplification, of course. It's a special program that involves gradual increases in the nature of the exposure. The first night she called me and told me they'd had her looking at pictures of a spider and talking about her experience. They were literally just cartoony drawings, but she told me she found it hard anyway. She cried and I cried too. She was only a few hours drive away, but I didn't want to be away from her, and everything had happened so suddenly. It was only 6 weeks between that night with the storm and her ending up in that clinic, but in that short period of time I felt like the ground had fallen from beneath my feet. 2 weeks she was in there. I don't remember them well. There were phone calls every night. She was getting better, she told me, and the doctor confirmed as much. Hard going for sure. They had to sedate her the day she graduated from cartoons to actual photos of spiders. Apparently she scratched an orderly up real bad. My time in the house was lonely. Little weird too, if I'm honest. I woke up at one point with cobwebs in my hair, and at some point I realized that I hadn't seen a spider in my home for a long time. Not even a little money spider. I briefly wondered about what the hell had been leaving cobwebs around the place, but never followed up on it. It's hard to get my thoughts straight. I do remember finding more dead mice all webbed up in the back of that kitchen cupboard. One morning I came down to find a starling cocooned on the outside of the kitchen window. No sign of what did it thought. I just stared at it and sipped my coffee, then I left for work, and when I came back it was gone. Probably not a good time to tell you I was diagnosed with a kind of dementia some time ago. I guess that's supposed to help make sense of things, right? I don't know. Doesn't feel like it makes sense to me. It's not like Alzheimer's runs in my family. They say the neurons of a human brain with Alzheimer's look like a cobweb that's had holes poked in it. That's a good way to describe how my mind feels to live inside. Thoughts travel along a given route, and then just drop off. Lily's therapy progressed nicely though. I remember that quite clearly. The phone calls and the sound of her voice. Real vivid. Jesus. I missed her so bad during this time. I hate being overly sentimental, but it had been a tough and lonely 6 weeks, and hearing her sound increasingly happy and confident with each new phone call was like a shot of pure happiness right into my veins. I missed her, and I wanted her back. And when she told me, giggling with joy, that she'd held a little spider on day 10, I burst out crying right with her. I felt pride at her accomplishment, and I felt relief that things might be getting back on track for us. Like the nightmare was finally going to be over. It wasn't so simple when I saw her in person. She came back looking like the war wounded. I should say she looked beautiful, but I want to be honest. I smiled when I saw her, but it didn't reach my eyes because the woman who got into the car looked a lifetime apart from the woman who had been living with me just a few months ago. She was thin as a rake, with ashy pallid skin and a shaved head that made her look like a matchstick, and her eyes. The look in them wasn't right, but she was smiling, so I swallowed the funny feeling I had in my stomach and pretended everything was okay. There was no work for her to go back to, and I managed to get some time off after speaking to my boss. It was just us, and that can be a weird feeling for a couple used to working 9 to 5. I was on edge, didn't know what to expect. She smiled a lot, tried her best to reassure me, and I asked a lot about what therapy was like, and she told me it was fantastic. Showed me photos of her sitting next to big house spiders, some as wide as her palm. Had to fight back my own fear while looking at them. She told me that was day 13, but when I asked what happened on day 14, she said it was mostly just packing up and saying goodbye. There is a dark and uncomfortable truth to relationships, and it's that time only flows in one direction. My wife hadn't done anything wrong, and I didn't really feel any ill will towards her, but a distance had been placed between us. All the best will in the world couldn't undo it. She'd changed. Been changed, I guess. At the time I didn't know how to understand any of it, but I wasn't sure how to treat her. When I kissed her it was on the cheek. When I held her it was like hugging a female coworker. I didn't know what my own feelings were, and I wouldn't until I found her one morning in the kitchen tapping away at a pint glass and giggling like a toddler. It wasn't the light and airy laughter of the woman I was used to. It was more like the laughter of a bunch of kids egging on a fight or cheering on a nasty bully. She didn't speak when she looked at me. She just turned back to the glass and kept laughing, flicking it gently with her fingers. When I walked around the table I saw it under there. A very large house spider. I don't know what is normal for people around the world, but a UK house spider is big if its legs are wider than the palm of your hand. This thing was even bigger, with legs bundled up against the side of the glass like spools of segmented wool, and seeing it made me jump way back. I realized I hadn't seen another spider since the night of the storm, and that thing all curled up with legs as thick as hairpins was a real shock to my system. I cried out, and my wife, she started howling with laughter. I mean, it was like a toddler discovering cartoons for the first time. Manic and weird and just so fucking happy, but in a way that was a little alien because I didn't understand the thoughts and feelings that went into that ear-splitting cackle, and it was all wrong coming from her. I waited for her to say something, but she didn't. She just laughed until something in her got tired, and she slowly stopped giggling, but she still didn't say anything even after she'd gone quiet. In the end, it was me who broke the silence. I didn't have a clue what to say. The whole time she was staring at me with her patchy hair and gleeful teary eyes, and I got so desperate to break the standoff that I stammered out the words. "He's a big one, ain't he?" Her face relaxed. Her shoulders slumped. She slipped out of the crazy like it was only ever an outfit. "They'll get bigger," she said. And then she lifted the glass, snatched the spider up, and stuffed it into her mouth. I didn't see it. Not fully, but I stood, frozen in terror, and watched the muscles in her badly shaved head tense and relax as her jaw worked away, crunching at those hardened legs. Jesus Christ. The sounds were bad enough, but when she was done, she looked over her shoulder at me and smiled, and her teeth were smeared green and black with littles of bits of leg and chitin still stuck between the gums. I'm not entirely sure what happened next, but now I knew why it felt so different around her since she'd come back. I was afraid of her, like a kid around an abusive parent. I just didn't know what I was gonna get. There was always this energy in the room that had me on edge. I'd sit there watching TV, but I wasn't really watching. Couldn't have told you what was on half the time. Instead, every ounce of my being was focused on her. Every breath, every motion. When she got up to use the toilet, I watched her intensely to see what she was going to do. The fact that she rarely did anything except carry on as normal was all the more unsettling, because I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't stop remembering the way Shed laughed with that thing under the glass. Nights were bad. A lot of the time I'd wake and get the feeling Shed just been watching me, but she was usually fast asleep, or at least that's how it looked. Sometimes there were furtive movements like Shed just rolled over. I got used to it, thought it was probably just in my head. But then one night I woke up and she was right there, face inches away from mine. I cried out, couldn't help it, shuffled backwards while trying to avoid touching her, and wound up falling off the bed. When I looked up from the floor, she had a completely blank expression. She was just looking at me like a cat watching a fly. "What are you doing?" I cried out, unable to stop the irritation from bleeding into my voice. She shrugged. "Just watching." Then she rolled over like nothing had happened. That night, I slept on the sofa. She didn't ask why. Didn't say a word as I grabbed my things and left the bedroom. I wasn't sure I would manage to fall asleep after that, but I did. And when I woke up, I had cobwebs in my hair. I was lucky if I slept more than a few hours a night after that. It came fitfully, if at all. I woke up too many times to the feeling of something tickling my face and chest, a sensation like someone running a feather over me. Every time I'd come to in a panic, but I never found anything except nearly invisible silk clinging to my skin. Life without sleep was difficult, and I struggled to hide my dislike for Lily. Over time, our habits and routines diverged even further apart. I stopped going upstairs almost entirely. Just didn't need to. I had work and the sofa in the kitchen, and the days when I came back and barely saw Lily at all were fine by me. I preferred being away from her, something that kinda broke my heart. If I'm honest, there were times I wanted to reach out, but looking at her gave me the funniest feeling in my stomach. I didn't want to change things, didn't want to get closer. If anything, I wanted to run away. And I don't mean that I wanted to flee my life and adult responsibilities in some abstract way. I mean I felt a powerful urge to quite literally run away from her. It was horrible feeling that way about my wife, and just trying to understand those emotions was enough to give me a headache most days. I became real forgetful during this time, and it was a long time before I realized I'd forgotten to pay for the repairs to the wall. I think it slipped my mind. Emphasis on think because I don't remember what I have and haven't forgotten. I just nailed some plywood over and left it, and 3 months later, one day out of the blue, it occurred to me I should probably have done something more about it. I did find a toolkit in the kitchen that wasn't mine. I might have called someone out for a quote, I don't know. But once I remembered that I'd never actually fixed the hole, I was filled with this shame and embarrassment, and I decided the best thing to do was to face it head on and go apologize to my neighbor. I never knew a lot about the guy. He was an older man who liked his football, had a nose like a tomato, and spent most nights in the pub. I knew he lived alone though, and when I knocked his door and there was no answer, it wasn't too strange. At least it didn't seem out of the ordinary, until I went back inside my house and heard footsteps on the other side of the wall. So I went back and I knocked a couple more times, figuring he maybe hadn't heard me, but there was still no answer. I found this weird. He didn't seem like the kind of guy who'd avoid a neighbor he didn't like. Had just opened the door and tell you to fuck off. I went back and looked, but couldn't see anything through his windows, and all I could see looking through his letterbox was a gray sheet across the opening. When my fingers came away covered in a sticky thread, I had this terrible feeling in my stomach. I couldn't have possibly explained how, but I was convinced that Lily had done something. After all, it was him calling the police who'd gotten her into trouble. But it wasn't like I could kick his door down to check, and I wasn't gonna go scrambling through any half-open windows. Fortunately, we shared a fence in the back garden. It was easy enough to jump, and from there I checked the windows on that side of the house. He'd left the kitchen blinds open, and at first what I saw baffled me. For a moment I wondered if he was decorating because everything inside was covered by a thin translucent sheet, but I only had to pay close attention to realize that didn't make sense. When painting a ceiling, you don't throw tarps over half-drunk cups of coffee and plates of moldy food. And the material that covered everything was cloudy and made of thread and obviously some kind of silk. It took a lot of effort to control the urge to just hop the fence back and pretend like I never saw a damn thing. But if he needed some kind of help, then I knew I had to at least try. I looked briefly at the stoop by the back door. There was a lighter on the ground where someone had dropped it. It was strangely conspicuous and made me think that whoever had left it there had done so in a hurry. Didn't make sense that someone would drop it there and not notice, not unless they'd been otherwise occupied. I picked it up and winced when it came from the floor with a sticky tearing sound. It was covered in barely visible silk threads. God, I wanted that back door to be locked. Couldn't think of anything worse than having to push ahead, but I tried the handle and it went down. The door popped open with barely any effort, and I got a good look at how every last inch of that place was covered in pale cobwebs that got thicker and thicker as my eyes drifted deeper inside the house. I couldn't help but wonder if they were strong enough to trap a person. Was my neighbor in there somewhere? Somebody was. I knew that much from the sounds I'd heard, but I couldn't see him in the kitchen. I wanted to cry out for him, maybe even go marching into the house and look for myself. But the hallway out of the kitchen had been turned into a web-lined tunnel. No straight lines. Just a dark silky womb whose rounded funnel walls fluttered gently in the breeze. I stared intently into that darkness, trying my best to see if there was the shape of a man's corpse cocooned somewhere in the pale white silk. I leaned forward, my head and shoulders just moving past the doorframe, when the blackness in the tunnel grew legs. Dark carapace and segmented limbs exploded towards me so fast it was almost in the kitchen before my heart had time to skip a beat. And then it stopped halfway into the room, standing perfectly still and brazen in the fading daylight, a bundle of legs the size of a horse. A real-life monster. I didn't move. Jesus Christ. It took me another minute just for my brain to process what I was looking at on a conscious level. My nervous system was quicker. Sure, it was like a blanket of disgust and terror was thrown over me. My stomach plunged to the floor. My skin crawled. My heart felt like it was going to explode. But my actual mind was blank. White noise and static. The creature was huge. So big its legs could just about fit in the hallway behind it. But in the kitchen with a little more room, those front limbs and mouthy feelers spread out like tendrils and gripped the doorway. It was ready to pounce on whatever had sent disturbances throughout its web. I've read that spiders can be a little like Venus flytraps. They won't always pounce on a single trigger. They need multiple hits. When I looked down at my feet, I saw that I'd taken just one step inside, but that was all it needed to be alerted. Now it had approached the initial alarm, and half blind, it waited for another hint of something trapped inside its web. I had to wonder, would lifting my shoe count? Did I have a choice? I couldn't stay there. Looking at the damn thing was bringing me closer and closer to full-blown panic with every passing second. I had to do something, and I had to do it with some semblance of control. I slid my foot backwards. The spider didn't move. As soon as both feet were outside, I let go of the door handle and felt something sticky detach from my palm. It feels like an exaggeration to say that lightning moves slower. I'm not sure I have the words to describe how fast it was. I'm sure most of you have seen a nature documentary with one of those fish, or maybe even a trapdoor spider, and you thought, oh shit, that was quick. But this thing, maybe it was just because it was coming right at me. I've never seen anything like it except for when videos get edited. All of a sudden it was just there, and before I knew it, thick woolly paps were pinning me to the ground, and I was looking into a pink slit of a mouth framed by fangs as long as my forearms. They moved independent of each other, and something about the sight of all those wheel-spoke legs and segmented joints clumped together in its thorax sent my mind reeling. I said at the beginning of this that a lifetime of exposure had helped curb my arachnophobia, but there are limits. I blacked out. When I woke up, it was dark all around me. I didn't know it at the time, but the belly of the beast was my neighbor's former living room. It wasn't actually pitch black, but it did take a few terrifying minutes for my eyes to adjust well enough just to be able to see my own body stuck and wriggling beneath me. I was wrapped up tight, and if you've ever heard the refrain that spider silk is stronger than steel and doubted it, well, trust me, it's true. A few thin threads doesn't give you a proper sense of it, but I was wrapped in what must have been a half-inch of the stuff, and I felt like I was wearing 10 layers of lycra that was too small. There was a tiny bit of give. Enough to let me move fingers or toes, or even bend a knee just a fraction, but that was it. It was horrifying. I'm not exactly claustrophobic either, for what it's worth, but given the circumstances I found myself panicking as I tried to get some purchase. I kept thinking if I could get a finger hooked into it, then maybe I could start tearing away. I was desperate, but the more I fought, the more I realized it was hopeless. The silk was elastic and strong and covered in a thick, stodgy glue that only further limited my movement as everything I did spread it around until it was gumming my legs and hands together. It wasn't until exhaustion caught up to me and I was forced to take a short break that I realized I wasn't alone. There was another cocoon beside me. My neighbor had been a big man in life, podgy with a large pot belly and a head like a thumb. But in the dim light of that room, he looked like a skeleton wrapped in skin that had been found half decayed in an ancient and forgotten tomb. So thin and desiccated you could hook a finger under the tendons in his neck and jaws. I nearly cried when I realized I'd risked everything to save a dead man, but that wasn't actually true. The error in my thinking became apparent when he opened his eyes and glared at me with pure, unbridled terror. He opened his mouth and I was convinced he was about to scream when instead he coughed and gagged and something wet and brown dribbled out of his mouth. It flopped down his chin and came to rest on the floor between us. It resembled a hairband encased in bile and vomit, and I was momentarily stumped until I saw a thin brown leg unfurl from the tangled mess. It's okay. My neighbor's entire body relaxed, his eyes vacant and confused, as Lily knelt down beside me and stroked my head. "Lily, you've got to get me." "Shad," she said, pressing a single finger to my lips. "It's okay. It's going to be okay." Behind her a shadow appeared. It had legs as thick as my wrist, and they reached from the floor to the ceiling. "It won't be much longer now," she added as the darkness behind her grew. "Probably best to just keep you here." "Lily, what the fuck?" I told you they get bigger, she said, nodding towards the spider my neighbor had just spat onto the floor. He won't be any real help. She touched my neighbor's head, but he barely responded. He just gazed vacantly as she rolled him over so that he was facing away from me. For such a clever animal, she added as she parted his hair. I'm always curious about just how much you miss. Something was clamped around the back of his head, a throbbing bulb of mottled brown skin and hair. It looked like a spider without legs. A tick, maybe. That's what I thought it was until my wife ran a finger playfully along its back and my neighbor let out a gut-wrenching squeal of pain. Slowly, the shape seemed to wriggle and writhe, and a long, thin leg emerged from beneath its body, and I realized I was looking at a spider wrapped tight around his skull, its legs buried beneath the skin and muscle of his scalp. For a moment it playfully curled the leg in the air before returning it to the incision and sliding it back into place, every inch disappearing with a gruesome wet sound. It displaced muscle and hair, and when it came to rest, I realized just how misshapen his skull had become from all those legs wrapped tight around his head. "What the fuck?" I gasped. "Do you ever find it weird that you could remember what it looked like? The thing that came running out of her hand?" she asked before reaching over to stroke my head. Her hand came away covered in cobwebs. Something about her touch revolted me. It sent strange shivers coursing through my body. A deep primordial need to get away came over me. That strange revulsion all over again. The same one that had taunted me over and over again, over the last few weeks. Without even meaning to, I found myself convulsing and panicking, my body trying to thrash violently, but with every limb constricted by that silk I could do nothing except writhe around on the floor. I tried with everything I had to move my hands, to get some purchase on the silk and tear away at it to free myself. But it was no use. I could do nothing except glare at my wife, and the enormous shadow behind her, the one that towered above us both, its great legs clustering around the floor and ceiling. At some point I grabbed onto my trousers and clenched my fist and felt something small and hard. The lighter. I knew there was great risk in using it, but I had no choice. I managed to worm my hand into my pocket and find it with my fumbling fingers. My wife seemed oddly aware of what I was doing, and she seemed to tilt her head like a curious dog as I clenched my fist around the small object and used every ounce of willpower I had left to fight the violent seizures that racked my body and thumbed the trigger. The web went up in flames immediately. It must have been the glue, but the flames exploded across the silk like they'd been soaked in kerosene. Before I even realized that it had weakened enough for me to free one arm, the tongues of fire were already spreading across the floor where they found my poor neighbor. The burning sensation that crawled across my legs and chest hurt like nothing I could imagine, but I was finally free. I rolled over and began to push myself up, already desperately patting at my body to try and put out the flames. When I looked around me, my wife and the shape that followed her were gone. For a moment I considered helping my neighbor, but his body thrashed too violently, and although his eyes were wide open, spiders were pouring from his mouth, and I could not summon the courage to take another step towards him. All I could think of was escape. The house was going up like a tinderbox. It wasn't far to the kitchen, but the fire had already beat me there. Smoke billowed upwards and, trapped by the ceiling, started to fill the air with choking soot. The only escape was the back door, and I stumbled towards it but was stopped at the last moment by the sight of my wife standing there. "You really are such a fascinating speck." I barreled past her, but to my surprise she offered no resistance. I merely emerged into the open air, my lungs gasping desperately for clean air as I collapsed onto long unkempt grass. I looked over my shoulder and saw orange tongues of fire were already leaping out of the windows on the upper floor. Left uncontrolled, the fire would rage and consume the entire row of terrace houses. I felt a moment of remorse, but there were already sirens in the distance, so I knew someone had noticed and done the right thing. But it wasn't over. Lily was sitting on the fence. I don't know how she got there, but she looked completely undisturbed. "I never once imagined that when that wind blew me into your home, I'd find such an interesting pair of people," she said. "What a fun mine to sink my legs into. I really had no idea what I was going to find." "Let her go," I gasped. "I have," she said with a shrug. "I did, months ago as a matter of fact. There were some incompatibilities, and it just made sense to move homes." She pointed at me and smiled. "I've enjoyed living inside your head quite a bit." Struggling to make sense of her words, but still somehow aware of their terrifying implications, I placed one hand on the back of my head and felt her. The mere touch was enough to fill my mouth with a coppery taste, while my vision blurred at the edges. Something beneath my skin shifted, and I felt a terrible pressure behind my eyes. I had to get rid of her. and I only knew of one weakness. "Oh well," she said as she watched me fumble desperately for the lighter. "Not every relationship has to last forever to be meaningful." I lit my hair on fire. My last memories were of heat and a sudden release of pressure. I couldn't possibly describe it to you. Not really. Something slid out of my skull, and Lily waved at me from the fence before she seemed to blink out of existence, and then nothing. Not even darkness. Just total absence. I wouldn't regain a sense of self until the hospital several weeks later. There was nothing left of either house, but they did manage to control the fire before it spread to the others. I'm sure there was still some damage, and to this day I feel guilty about it. I think I was charged with arson. Maybe more. I have vague memories of being wheeled into a courtroom. The doctors have agonized over me for a long time, and one mentioned amateur trepanation. He said I must have practiced it on my wife, at least based on the body they found in my neighbor's house. But I can't really be sure of anything. I am forever dipping in and out of reality. Writing this down has been difficult. I'm not entirely aware where I am right now. One doctor told me I might make some kind of recovery, if it was just normal brain damage, but had never seen anything like it, so he couldn't be sure. Feels like it's a different doctor every time I see them. Then again, I don't always recognize myself when I look in the mirror. Of course that could just be the burns, but I reckon even then I still look a fair bit older than I should. There's one orderly who's stuck around long enough to get to know me. He knows me by name, smiles a lot when he sees me, talks to me about all sorts of things. He seems genuinely interested in me and what I remember. I called him in once to get rid of a spider that had spun a web on the window outside, and he did so with a warm smile. I told him I was deathly afraid of them, and he said he already knew that, but I shouldn't worry because he was going to keep an eye on me and make sure nothing bad happened. I'm glad he's around. Ever since he started working here, I haven't seen many of the nasty little things hanging around my room. I guess he's not that bothered by them, at least not if the cobwebs in his hair are anything to go by. Story 5. My partner and I responded to a domestic. The house showed us the murders happening over and over. It was a late shift, one of those quiet nights where the city seems to be holding its breath. The kind of night you almost welcome a call just to break the monotony. Then the radio crackled. "Unit, my unit. Respond to a possible 1016 domestic disturbance at vague rural route descriptor. Caller is a juvenile. 1016 domestic." My gut tightened. Domestics are always unpredictable, always a powder keg. Juvenile caller? Even worse. That usually means things are really bad if a kid's the one reaching out. I keyed the mic. Dispatch. Any further details on that 1016? The dispatcher's voice came back, a little tinny. Negative, my unit. Call was very broken, heavy static, sounded like a young male. Managed to get the address, but not much else. Sounded distressed. Mentioned something about fighting, maybe a parent. 10 d'Abril, en route. My partner, let's call him Jay, grunted from the passenger seat. Kid calling on a domestic. Never a good sign. Nope, I agreed. The address was way out on the edge of our jurisdiction, bordering on county. One of those places where houses are spread thin, swallowed by trees and long driveways. Takes a while to get out there, and backup takes even longer. The drive itself felt off. The further we got from the city lights, the darker the world became. Street lights became a memory. The only illumination came from our headlights, cutting a swathe through what felt like an endless tunnel of trees. The kind of dark that presses in on you. We finally found the turnoff, a gravel road that was more potholes than path. The house itself was set way back, almost invisible from the road. A 2-story, older build, but it looked lived in. Maybe a bit unkempt, toys scattered on the porch, that kind of thing. All the windows were dark. A single car, an older sedan, was parked in the driveway. An unsettling silence hung over the place. "Quiet?" Jen muttered, and I couldn't disagree. Too quiet. We parked a little ways back, cut the engine. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the crunch of gravel under our boots as we approached. I did a quick visual sweep. No obvious signs of forced entry, no sounds from within. The house just looked, still, expectant. "Police! Anyone home?" I called out, knocking firmly on the front door. The wood felt solid. Nothing, just that heavy silence. Jay tried the doorbell. A faint standard chime echoed from somewhere deep inside, then died. Still no response. "All right," I said, Keeping my voice low, I'll check windows on this side. You take the back, see if you can spot anything. Got it. Jay moved off around the side of the house. I went from window to window on the front, and one side. They were all dark, curtains drawn in most. I cupped my hands around my eyes, trying to peer in through a gap in one, but it was like looking into a void. My flashlight beam just got swallowed by the blackness. A prickle of unease started to crawl up my spine. This wasn't just a quiet house. It felt wrong. Then it happened. A sudden brilliant flash from an upstairs window, almost blinding, followed instantaneously by the unmistakable booming crack of a gunshot, muffled but definitely a gunshot from inside. My heart hammered. Jay came running back around the corner, eyes wide. You hear that? Gunshot! Upstairs! I yelled, already moving towards the front door. Dispatch shots fired at the vague rural route descriptor location. We're making entry. No time for pleasantries now. I kicked the door hard, right near the lock. It shuddered, then gave way with a splintering crack, flying inwards and banging against an interior wall. Police! Show yourselves! I shouted into the darkness, my weapon drawn, flashlight beam cutting a nervous path ahead. Jay was right beside me, doing the same. The inside of the house was pitch black, blacker than outside, if that was possible. A close, stuffy smell hit us. Stale air, a hint of old food, and something else, something metallic, almost like copper, faint but there. The air was heavy, cold, colder than it should have been. Police, if you're in here, make yourself known. Jaff's voice echoed unnervingly. We moved slowly, methodically, standard room clearing, what we're trained for. Flashlights darting into corners, weapons ready. The silence was back, thick and oppressive, broken only by our own breathing and the occasional scuff of our boots on the hardwood floor. Anyone who fired that shot, come out slowly with your hands in the air, I commanded, my voice tight. Still nothing. It felt like we were shouting into a vacuum. We cleared the small entryway, moved into what looked like a living room. Furniture was ordinary, if a little cluttered. A TV, a sofa, kids' toys scattered on the floor. It looked like a family lived here, a family that had suddenly stopped. Then, a flicker of movement in the periphery of my flashlight beam at the far end of a hallway leading deeper into the house. Freeze! Police! A small figure, a kid, darting across the hallway, looked like a boy, maybe 10 or 12. He was running, desperation in his movements, his small face a pale blur in the split second I saw him. Before I could even process it, before I could shout another command, another figure stepped out from a doorway just beyond where the kid had run. Taller, older, holding something long. A shotgun. My blood ran cold. It all happened in a split second. The older boy, teenager, maybe, raised the shotgun. Another blinding flash. Another deafening roar that seemed to suck all the air from the hallway. The little kid crumpled, just dropped, like a puppet with its strings cut. No, I screamed. Raw, instinctive. Jay and I both opened fire. Our service weapons barked, muzzle flashes momentarily illuminating the horrifying scene. We emptied half our magazines at the figure with the shotgun. Our bullets, they went through him. I saw them, saw the rounds pass through his form as if he were made of smoke, impacting the wall behind him with dull thuds. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there, the shotgun still smoking. Then, he turned his head, slowly, and looked right at us. I couldn't see his face clearly in the shifting flashlight beams, but I felt his gaze, cold, empty. He raised the shotgun again, leveled it at us. Jay and I both braced, instinctively flinching, expecting the impact, the pain. He fired, the flash, the roar. Nothing. We were still standing, untouched. Adrenaline coursed through me, hot and sickening. My ears were ringing. And then, he was gone. The older boy, the shotgun, vanished. Just not there anymore. I swung my flashlight wildly. The hallway was empty. Jay was doing the same, his breath coming in ragged gasps. What the hell was that? He stammered. My light found the spot where the younger boy had fallen. He was gone too. No body, no blood, nothing. Just the clean floorboards and the pockmarks on the wall where our rounds had hit. My mind was reeling. Hallucination? Mass hysteria? But we both saw it. We both fired our weapons. The smell of gunpowder from our guns was thick in the air, mingling with that faint phantom scent. Did Did we just imagine that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. No way, Jay said, his voice hoarse. No damn way. I saw it. I shot at him. We stood there for a long moment, the silence pressing in again, now laced with an icy, unnameable dread. This wasn't a domestic. This wasn't anything we'd ever trained for. We need to clear the rest of the house, I said, trying to inject some normalcy, some procedure back into the situation. But my hands were shaking. Check upstairs. That's where the first shot came from. Jay nodded, looking pale but resolute. Right. We moved towards the stairs, every creak of the old wood under our boots sounding like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The stale air smell was stronger up here. Each step felt like we were descending further into a nightmare, not climbing. The upstairs landing was small, leading to a few closed doors. We checked the first one. A child's bedroom, clothes strewn about, posters on the wall, empty. The second, a bathroom, towels on the floor, equally silent. The chill in the air seemed to deepen. The last door at the end of the hall, it was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly with the barrel of my gun, Jed covering me. My flashlight beam pierced the darkness. A bedroom, a large bed in the center, unmade, and on the bed, two shapes, vague outlines under a rumpled duvet. As my light hit them, the scene replayed. The older boy was there again, standing beside the bed, shotgun in hand. He looked younger, somehow, his face contorted in something that wasn't quite rage, wasn't quite pain, more like a terrible hollow resolve. He raised the shotgun, aimed it at the figures in the bed. "Don't!" I yelled, even though some part of me knew it was useless. He fired. Once, twice. The flashes lit up the room, the roars deafening. The figures on the bed, they didn't move. Then he turned. That same slow, deliberate turn, and he saw us, standing in the doorway. There was no surprise on his face, just that same chilling emptiness. He raised the shotgun towards us again, fired. Again the flash, the roar. Again nothing hit us. And then, just like before, he flickered and vanished. The figures on the bed, gone. The room was empty. No bodies. No blood. No spent shells. Just the lingering smell of phantom gunpowder and the suffocating weight of what we'd just witnessed. Twice. This was madness. Sheer, unadulterated madness. "Okay," Jay said, his voice strained. "I'm officially losing my damn mind." "Me too," I managed. "Let's try dispatch again." I fumbled for my radio. "Dispatch unit, my unit. Can you copy?" Static. Thick. Impenetrable static. Like the call that had brought us here. Jay tried his. Same result. Comms are out. Completely jammed. We were alone in this house. Utterly alone with whatever this was. "We searched this place top to bottom," I said, my voice harder than I felt. "Every inch. There has to be an explanation." We did. We went through every room, every closet, the small attic space, the unfinished basement. Nothing. No bodies. No fresh bloodstains. No weapons. No signs of a struggle beyond what we'd seen happen. The house was just a house. A recently lived-in house where something terrible had clearly occurred, but all physical evidence of the victims and perpetrator had vanished, leaving only these impossible echoes. It was like the house was a stage and we'd stumbled into a performance of some horrific never-ending play. Exhausted, frustrated, and deeply, deeply unnerved, we ended up back in that upstairs bedroom. Jay walked over to the window, the one where we'd seen the initial flash. He stared out into the moonlit backyard. The moon was high now, casting long, eerie shadows. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Hey, come look at this." I joined him. The backyard was mostly grass, a bit overgrown around the edges, a swing set standing forlornly to one side. But under the pale moonlight you could see them. Patches. Rectangular patches in the earth. Slightly sunken, where the grass was disturbed. Darker. They were faint. Easily missed in daylight, or from ground level. But from up here, with the angle of the moonlight. "What are those?" Jay asked, but I think we both knew. My stomach churned. It'd been in the backyard earlier. He hadn't mentioned seeing anything like this then. The angle, the light, it all mattered. "Let's get outside," I said. "Try comms again from there." We practically ran out of that house. The fresh night air, even though it was cold, felt like a blessing after the stale, charged atmosphere inside. My radio crackled to life the moment we cleared the porch. My unit, dispatch. What's your status? We've been trying to reach you. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. Dispatch, unit, my unit. We're outside the residence. We need backup, and CSI, and maybe a priest. I don't know. What's the situation, my unit? I took a deep breath. Dispatch. We have what appear to be graves in the backyard. Multiple. The silence on the other end was telling. Then 10-4, my unit. Backup and relevant units are en route. ETA 20 minutes. We waited, flashlights trained on those patches in the backyard, the house looming dark and silent behind us. It felt like it was watching us. When backup finally arrived, along with the detectives and the CSI van, it was like a dam bursting. The sheer normalcy of other officers of procedure was a lifeline. We gave our preliminary statements, trying to make sense of what we'd seen, leaving out the impossible parts for now. No one would believe us. Not yet. The CSI team got to work on the patches. Shovels bit into the soft earth. It didn't take long. They found them. 3 bodies. 2 adults. A male and a female in one shallow grave, consistent with what we'd seen in the upstairs bedroom. The decomposition suggested they'd been there for a few days at most. In a separate, even shallower grave, they found the younger boy. He too looked like he'd been there for only a couple of days. The bodies were bagged and transported to the morgue. The coroner wouldn't give any on-site preliminary beyond confirming they were deceased and the state of decomposition. We'd have to wait for the official autopsy for causes of death. The house was processed. They found our spent casings, the bullet holes in the wall of the hallway, but nothing else. No other weapon, no other shells, no blood that wasn't ours. Jay had nicked his hand on the broken door frame. And the older brother, the shooter, no trace of him. Not in the house, not in any of the graves. He was just gone, as if he'd stepped out of the scene once his part in the replay was done. Days later, the full coroner's report came in. The parents had died from shotgun wounds. Multiple, executed. The boy was different. He had injuries. A shotgun shot injured him badly. But the official cause of death, asphyxiation due to suffocation, dirt found deep in his lungs. He'd been buried alive, injured but still breathing. My blood turned to ice all over again. Colder this time. The static-filled call. The distressed juvenile. He'd called from under the ground. He'd been calling for help as he was dying, as the earth pressed in on him. And the house had shown us. It had replayed the tragedy, his final moments, his family's murder. We never found the older brother. The case went cold. Another unsolved family annihilation with a supernatural twist that no official report would ever contain. Jay and I, we talked about it, just once. A few weeks later, we agreed we saw what we saw. We agreed never to talk about it to anyone else on the force. They'd think we were crazy. Maybe we were. But I know that house is still out there. And sometimes, late at night when the radio's quiet, I can almost hear that static, and the little boy's voice crying out from the dark. I don't sleep much anymore. Story 6. I'm a psychologist. I reported a client, but now I'm the one under investigation. She's in the walls, he said. I paused, not ready to jump to any conclusions. I've had clients say the craziest things, only for it to turn out to be something mundane, misunderstood. You think I'm having difficulty telling reality apart from fantasy, he continued, a tinge of spite in his tone. I blinked. Then I remembered. In one of our past sessions, he had shared some pretty implausible tales, like how he was a master of black magic. He had talked about the hexes he had successfully cast in the past. I had gently probed his narrative, wanting to see how real his belief was to him. He must have realized I had doubted his grasp of reality. I'm just curious. What do you mean by she's in the walls? I asked, keeping my expression pleasant, calm. He could still be talking about something perfectly normal, like a rat, a lizard. After I killed her, I placed her body behind the walls and bricked them up again. Okay, he wasn't leaving much room for doubt. Are you saying that you killed the woman you've been having nightmares about? As I spoke, I flicked open up the web WhatsApp window on my screen and typed a quick text to the clinic manager. Potentially dangerous client, stand by for emergency protocols. He nodded. The bad dream started a day after I killed her and sealed her behind the walls. He proceeded to tell me what he had been unwilling to tell me in our session last week. He told me how he had felt something strange stir within him when he had first caught sight of this woman. She worked near him. It wasn't love. It was a fascinated contempt, a horrified disgust. He couldn't take his mind off her and followed her, everywhere. He figured out her schedule, who she would meet, places she would go. He finally got her alone one day, down a road she occasionally took while going for her early morning runs. He didn't have any brilliant plan in mind, and so he just struck her in the back of the head as she ran by with a rock he kept in his pocket. She had fallen. He had simply scooped her up and carried her to his car parked nearby. No one was around to witness it in the wee hours of the morning. Still hoping for some normalcy, I tried to formulate what this could really be about. Maybe he needed attention. Maybe he liked to shock and awe others with outlandish tales. I mean, carrying an unconscious woman to his car. That couldn't be as easy as he made it out to be. Maybe he wanted to test me, see how I would react to a wild tale of murder, right? "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because of the nightmares. They wouldn't stop. I tried not to tell you about it, to just work through the nightmares without context. But I realize I need you to know, so you can give me proper help." There was a dead earnest look in his eyes. Suddenly, I believed him. I could no longer try to poke holes in his story. This man meant every word he said. "Call the police. Tell them a client just confessed to murder. Might be dangerous right now. Get them down here." I typed on the WhatsApp chat, pretending to be taking notes. I had to break confidentiality at that point. It was legal protocol. "The nightmares. Yes. Tell me more about them. You said they were vivid, that you would wake up screaming. What did you dream about?" I asked, hoping to stall him until the police came. I was honestly also a little curious. He hadn't been willing to tell me the contents of his nightmares last week. Just her face, right in front of mine. She would start off looking terrified the way she looked when I slit her throat. Then she would grin. A wicked grin. She was a wicked, evil woman. I fought the urge to raise an eyebrow. She was a wicked woman. That was your sense in the dream. I gave myself a pat on the back for keeping my tone clear of the disbelief and contempt I felt. He slit her throat, but she was evil. Holy shit. She was always evil. I knew that. So I did what I needed to do, what the world needed me to do. He smiled brightly at me and winked. My stomach churned. It was a knowing wink, like we had some shared secret. I kept quiet, and he went on with his tale. He told me about 5 minutes worth of the story before the police came. He said he knew she was evil. From the dark aura he could see. He stalked her to make sure, and saw the horrible things she did to others. She was condescending, manipulative, rude, and a bully. He spat the word bully like it singed his lips to say it. Despite myself, I noted his reaction down in my clinical notes, flinched at the word bully. He got rid of her, hid her body in the walls of some deserted building. He told me the building name. I knew it. I lived near it. I had watched dozens of stores open and shut down within months at that place. No one knew why business was so bad there. The location wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. But it was infamous for being bad luck for shop owners. It was in the process of being sold to a new owner for redevelopment. "But I hear her now," he said, fear flickering in his eyes. "When I lie awake late at night, she scratches at my walls. I know she's not in there. I know where she lies. But the scratching, it wouldn't stop." The door opened then, and 2 police officers stepped in. I was relieved that they had the sense not to sound the sirens or kick up a fuss before entering the room. I had been worried that my client would be triggered once alerted to the police's arrival. I didn't want him to hold me hostage or something. They cuffed him and took him away. He turned to face me right before they led him out the door. There was a look of calm and satisfaction on his face, like he had expected me to call the police, like he knew what would happen, and as if he wasn't afraid of the consequences. Once again he smiled. My insides curled. I headed down to the police station and gave them all the details my client had told me about the murder. Once I got home, I took a shower and downed some wine. It was a wild day. I was ready to put it behind me and get back to normal. I slept fitfully. There were flitting images of my client in my dreams. His look of satisfaction, his knowing wink. There was also a persistent scratching sound that I couldn't locate. The next day, awake but in a fog, I was called back to the station. "How did you know Anita?" Not the real name was the first question I was asked. My brows furrowed. I knew only one Anita. Why were they asking about my crazy ex-boss? "She was my employer for a short while," I responded. "I worked for her a few years back for less than a year." "Did you part on bad terms?" I bit my lip. Why was the investigator asking about this out of the blue? There was a sinking sensation in my gut. Yes, she was difficult to work for. When I quit, she blew her top, threatened me. Why are you asking about her? I had a terrible feeling I knew the answer. Did you kill Anita? My mouth went dry. I stared at him in disbelief, but his face was an impassive mask. No. Shit. The woman in the walls. Then how did you know the location of her body? I gaped at him. The woman he killed. It was Anita, wasn't it? He's saying he has no idea what you're talking about, that you hypnotized him last session, did something to his mind. He's been having nightmares ever since. The fuck? I stared at the officer, mouth open. Hey, right now, he said. You said. We're just trying to figure things out. But I've got to say, that man has no connection to Anita at all. No one spotted him near her. Not even a text. A phone call. Nothing. You, on the other hand, he sighed. You worked for her. You were open about your dislike for her. We saw some of your posts on social media. Subtle, vague, but quite clearly targeted at her. Posts. Social media? I hated Anita, sure, but posting about her? I didn't have that kind of guts. She was a terrifying, cunning bitch. She had considerable influence in our industry. She could make life pretty tough for me, as she had made it for many others. I had no wish to invite further backlash. The officer pulled out his phone, tapped on it for a bit, then showed it to me. Posts. From a social media account with my name on it, even my face, but it wasn't my account. I told the officer so. This account has been active for the past 2 years, he said. For 2 years it has been posting intermittently under your identity, and you've never been informed or aware about it. I grabbed his phone again, and looked at the account more closely. It has 43 followers. Come on. And I bet none of them are my friends. How could I have found out about it? It's not like I obsessively Google my name or something. The officer took his phone back. He remained expressionless. The next 2 hours of interrogation were brutal. I told him in minute detail all that I could remember about my employment under Anita, the fallout the following months of insults and her attempts to blackball me. How her attempts failed, because by then many in the industry knew her reputation. I even admitted to going for therapy sessions to deal with the trauma from it all. He said he might subpoena my therapist for clinical notes, but whatever. I didn't say anything crazy during those therapy sessions. I couldn't exactly be completely open and honest in sessions with fellow therapists after all. We might still one day cross paths in our work. My could have been alibi, the doorbell camera, just so happened to be disconnected on the night she was murdered. I hadn't even noticed. I only checked the footage whenever something cropped up, like this investigation. I had gone to the park nearby for a walk that night. When I was supposedly murdering Anita, I told the police, and they went around the neighborhood looking for surveillance footage from shops, car dash cams, and witnesses who may have seen me, but there was nothing. By then it was abundantly clear. I was being set up. Somehow that client had been planning to murder Anita for years. He had been setting me up for years. It all looked bad for me. My history with Anita, my knowledge of exactly where she was hidden, how she died. The social media posts which somehow had its IP tied into my Wi-Fi, I cursed myself for having a predictable Wi-Fi password. The client claimed that he had never spoken about Anita or any murder, that he had recently come back for help with nightmares related to a past memory he hadn't told me about, that I had hypnotized him. It was EMDR. I just let him access the memory related to the nightmares without telling me what it was, and did EMDR with him, letting his eyes follow my fingers as he accessed the traumatic memories. It was far from hypnosis. It was a legit tool to help with traumatic experiences. It was bilateral stimulation. It was nothing like hypnosis. The asshole had twisted everything. He told the police I made his nightmares worse, and that he didn't know what happened during our most recent session. Said he had been dazed by my hypnosis when the police came. It's incredible how easily someone can destroy your life if they choose to. 1 minute I had my life together, more or less. Next, I was under suspicion of murder. I originally thought being innocent would clear my name quickly, but turns out that's not how the legal system works. Things only got worse. The night I got home after the interrogation, I downed a bottle of wine, then I lay in bed, trying to sleep, to get some respite from the nightmare that my life was morphing into. A scraping sound roused me to full alertness. Another scraping sound. It was like something scratching. There was something scratching behind my walls. My heart skipped a bit, and my breath caught in my throat. Hesitantly, gingerly, I pressed my ear to the wall. The scratching was loud, like nails on drywall. It felt like something was scratching a centimeter from my ear. I jerked away from the wall and sank back down on my bed, my limbs weak. There was another sound. Was it a whisper? I couldn't tell. It was faint, covered by the scratching sounds. I was imagining things, I told myself. The investigation was fraying my nerves. The wine had muddled my sanity. I thought of fleeing to a hotel for the night, but the police had told me to stay where I was. I didn't want to look like I was running away. I got back into bed and shut my eyes. I was imagining things. I repeatedly told myself. The scratching continued. There was no way I could sleep. An agonizing few minutes later, a soft humming started up. It rose in volume until it resembled static, or the type of sound a white noise machine might produce. The static began to overwhelm even the sounds of scratching. I tried to sit up then, to get out of the house. Consequences be damned. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I couldn't even open my eyes. I struggled desperately, straining with every fiber of my being, screaming silently to the point where I thought my lungs would burst. But I couldn't move a single muscle, couldn't make the slightest sound. Then I dreamt. Or I think I did. I saw her behind my closed lids. Anita knelt before me, begging for her life. An arm reached out. Mine. I grabbed Anita by her arm and hit her in the side of her already bleeding head with a rock. She collapsed to the ground, like a puppet with its strings cut. I stood over her, grinning. A knife glinted. A knife that I held, I realized. I knelt down and placed the knife against Anita's throat. I couldn't stop it. Couldn't will my hand to stop. Couldn't wipe the grin from my face. Something rushed me from the side. I toppled over. You killed me. Someone was screeching. I looked around frantically. A dark energy, like a swirling cloud. A flash of a maniacal smile from something within. You killed me, and you'll pay. The dark mass swept towards me. I screamed, fended whatever it was off with my arms. Silence. I looked around. Nothing was around me. No dark cloud. But Anita was there, a pool of blood spreading beneath her neck. I looked down. The knife in my hand was covered with blood. I woke up screaming. My shirt was soaked with perspiration. The police came for me a few hours after that. They told me they had found my prints on her arm, right where I had seen myself grab her in the dream. I can't explain it anymore. I know for a fact, I know with all my being that I didn't do it. I didn't snap, split from reality, nothing. I remember the night she died. I was home. I got bored and went for a walk in the park. I went home after my 45 minutes of brisk walking was up. I was trying to keep fit. But the dreams, the posts, the scratching in my walls, he had set me up, sure. But how could he have accessed my bedroom walls, my dreams? They arrested me. I was held for weeks before a judge finally granted me bail. I was to be on house arrest until my case was tried. No flight risk, a stable career, good community relations, no priors. I was lucky to get bail, they said. I didn't feel lucky at all. I got one text from that client in all this time. Do you know what's real? I had stared, confused, for a moment, before I flung the phone onto the sofa in anger. Was that what this was all about? Was he doing this to me because I had made some comments that suggested he might have broken from reality? Did he seek sessions with me just to set me up? Did he ever even need therapy? I retrieved my phone within a minute, once I realized I could screenshot the text as evidence, but the text was gone, evaporated into thin air. Maybe I really don't know what's real. Maybe I am losing my mind. I'm stuck at home for the next 2 months. Maybe longer if there are delays in getting the case to court. My life is over. My reputation is in tatters. And still, every night, the scratching goes on. The nightmares keep coming. I wake screaming every night. Anita's face, contorted sometimes in rage, sometimes in agony. My client's grin. The dreams are so vivid they are starting to feel like memories. Maybe I should just give in. Say I did it. Plead guilty. Hope for the death sentence. Because I can't live like this anymore. Story 7. They told me I was in a car accident. I remember something else. I was attending an art show when I saw it, the latest work by an avant-garde sculptor. It's a series. He calls them idols, a friend explained. Seeing its revolting tumor-like essence, I was sent spiraling silently into my own repressed past. I felt a sting. When I turned to look, a woman wearing a calf's head was removing a needle from my arm. My body went numb. I was lifted, carried to one of a dozen slabs radiating out from a central stone altar, and set down. Looking up, I saw the stars in the night sky, obscured by dark, slowly swaying branches, and masked animal faces gazing at me. Someone held an axe, and while others held me down, left arm fully extended, the axeman brought the blade down, cleaving me at the shoulder. A sharp pain. The world suddenly white, a ringing in my ears before nighttime returned and chants and drumming replaced the ringing. A physical sensation of body lack. I was forced up seated. The stench of burning flesh, my own, as a torch was held to my stub, salve applied, and I was wrapped in bandages. Meanwhile, my severed arm had been brought to the altar and heaped upon a hill of other limbs and flesh. Insects buzzed. Moths chased the very flames that killed them. The chanting stopped. From within the surrounding forests, black as distilled nothing, a figure emerged. Larger than human, it was cloaked in robes whose purple shined in the flickering torchlight. It shambled toward the altar, stopped, and screeched. At that, the cries of children, as 3 had been released, being driven forward by whips. I tried to scream, but I was still too numbed, and the only sound I managed was a weak and pitiful braying. The children stopped at the foot of the hill of limbs, forced to their knees, shaking. Of their hearts and bodies, and of the world, and all of us in it, the drumming was relentless. The chanting now resumed, inhuman. Several masked men approached the figure at the altar and pulled away its robes, revealing a naked creature with the body of a disfigured, corpulent human and the oversized head of an owl. It began to feast. On the limbs and flesh before it, and on the kneeling children, stabbing and cracking with its beak, pulling them apart, eating them alive. When it had finished, and the altar was clean save for the stains of blood, the creature stood and bellowed, and from its bowels were heard the subterranean screams of its victims. Then it gagged and slumped forward, and onto the altar regurgitated a single mass of blackness, bones and hair. This, 3 masked men took. And the creature. I awoke in the hospital, missing my left arm. I was informed I'd been in a car accident and my arm had been amputated after getting crushed by the vehicle. The driver had died, as had everyone in the other vehicle involved, a single mother and her 3 children. Story 8. My child went missing and came back different. I never thought I'd come online for advice, especially about something like this. I'm used to having all the answers, or at least I'm good at pretending I do. You see, I write an advice column for a small town paper. If anyone could sort this out, it should be me. That's what makes the situation feel even more hopeless. This is the part where I'm supposed to say I know how crazy it sounds. I don't. I know how it reads. I know how you're probably tilting your head right now, skeptical but curious, the way I do when I get letters for my column about cheating husbands or truant kids. Despite never fully knowing what I was doing, I always had the language to make others think I did, but I don't have language for this. I just have him. Let me back up. My son is 8 was 8. I don't know anymore. We were at the park for a playgroup thing. Other moms, other kids. Same place we'd gone every month since he was 3. Wood chips, a few slides, a patch of woods we always said was too thin to get lost in. He was playing hide and seek. He was always good at that, almost too good. Clever in a way that made you worry what it'd grow into. I remember someone joking, he's either going to be a world leader or a criminal mastermind. They started calling his name. You won. Come on out. But he didn't. They kept calling, and something inside me shifted, like a lost, ancient instinct we outgrew centuries ago, like a sixth sense I didn't know I had. I don't remember most of that day, not in order, just pieces. My phone slipping out of my shaking hand when I tried to call 911, my knees hitting the dirt. A ranger saying the words, no sign of a struggle like that was supposed to help. They found nothing, no footprints, no fibers, no blood, just nothing. The search lasted 2 weeks, 14 days of reporters, canine units, and whispers behind hands. 14 nights of dreaming about body bags, and waking up to check his room. I kept the door open, like I expected him to just appear again, curled in his sheets, annoyed I was making a fuss. And during that time I became a shell of a person, voice raw from screaming his name, feet numb from chasing shadows, and eyes dry with no tears left. If you never lost a child, I don't think it's a feeling you can put into words. The regret, the devastation, the anger, the emptiness, the fear, the agonizing, burning self-hatred. You can try to sympathize, you can try to understand, but you never will. 2 weeks later, I got a call at 3:12 a.m. that found him walking along a logging road 6 miles from the park. He was cold, disoriented, but alive. When I saw him at the station, I melted, just dropped. My body shut down with relief. I hugged him and he let me, but he didn't hug back. He was in shock. I knew that, the officer said as much. This would take some time. The first night back, he slept in my bed. I watched him breathe like it was the most fragile thing in the world, holding his little body in my arms. I remember whispering, "I'll never let you go, ever again." I meant it. Then, now I'm not sure who I brought home. It's little things. That's how it always starts, right? Little things you tell yourself not to notice. He doesn't remember where he was. That's what they told me to expect. Trauma, amnesia, some protective thing the brain does. But it's not just that he forgot, it's that he doesn't seem to think there's anything to remember. He stares at me blankly when I ask, not confused, not scared, just blank. Like the questions in a language he never learned. He struggles with showering, getting dressed, anything that involves changing clothes. I had to compromise by letting him shower in his underwear, or else he won't even touch the water. He walks like he's copying someone, every step a second behind. He hums to himself now, but not songs I recognize, just slow, disjointed notes out of tune. It's been weeks and these new habits still haven't went away. He calls me mom, but it doesn't sound right. Like the shape of the word is right, but the soul of it is missing. Like hearing your name from a stranger pretending to know you. Last night I caught him standing in the hallway, not moving, just standing, staring at the wall like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Making sure no one's here." I laughed. I don't know why. It wasn't funny. It just short-circuited my brain. I told his therapist. I was careful. I said I thought the trauma had changed him, that he seemed different. She said that was normal, that kids process fear in strange ways. I nodded and pretended to agree. Then I went home and locked my bedroom door for the first time in my life. He eats less now, sleeps less. I think he even blinks less. I've checked his body for marks, scars, anything. I don't even know what I'm looking for. Some proof that what I feel isn't just panic unraveling me from the inside out, but everything's where it should be. Same cowlick, same chipped front tooth, same tiny freckle behind his left ear. But I know, that's not my son. It's not a dream. It's not paranoia. It's not some post-trauma spiral. It's something else, and I don't know what to do. If anyone's been through this, if anyone's ever felt this, please say something. Tell me I'm wrong, or tell me I'm not. Story 9. She left me for dead. I came back different. When you almost die, they say your life flashes before your eyes. I didn't see mine. I saw hers. You ever love someone so deeply, so absolutely, you start forgetting where they end and you begin? That was me and Mel. We were together for 5 years, 3 of them magical, 1 confusing, and the last nearly killed me. Literally. This isn't some sad boy she left me story. This isn't about heartbreak, or the sweet ache of moving on. This is a story about what came after, about what I became. Let me walk you there. I met Mel when I was 28. She walked into the bookstore where I worked like some fever dream in boots. She asked for a book I'd never heard of, and I had read everything. That's how she got me. Mystery, depth. A sense she got me. Mystery, depth. A sense she knew something I didn't. She always knew something I didn't. The first time she touched me, I felt like someone had peeled back my ribs and let the air in. Our connection was electric, the kind that melts your spine and frays your neurons. I was obsessed, but so was she, or so I thought. In year 3, she started coming home later. Her stories grew shallow. She started calling me sweetie the way you call a puppy. I should have known. I should have left, but I didn't. Because love makes you stupid and obsessed. And in my case, watchful. I started keeping tabs. Little things at first, checking her GPS, watching her location when she went to yoga. One night she said she was going to see her sister, and I followed her. She didn't go to her sister's. She went to his house. The guy from her job, she said, was like a brother. They kissed in the driveway like I didn't exist. I sat in my car and screamed until my throat bled. I could have confronted her, could have ended it like a sane person. But something in me had already snapped. I decided I'd wait. I'd collect proof, set her up, make her look like the monster she was. I would build my revenge like a cathedral, beautiful, icy, eternal. But I underestimated her. Because Mel wasn't just cheating on me, she was plotting. The night I confronted her was cold, bone cold. October wind slashing through the trees. I waited until she was home, calm, comfortable. I'd printed out pictures, screenshots, timestamps, a neat folder of betrayal. I dropped it on the kitchen table like a judge dropping a gavel. She didn't cry. She didn't bo eg, punto esake. He didn't scream. She laughed. Not the nervous laugh of someone caught. It was relief. God, finally, she said, sipping wine like it was a toast. I was wondering when you'd grow a spine. That's when I realized that she wanted out, had been pushing me to break, making me look like the psycho, and I played right into it. I lost it, I yelled, through the wine glass. She just stared at me like I was a bug on the floor. Then she said, I think you need to cool off. Maybe take a drive, clear your head. So I did. She must have known I'd take the back roads, that I'd hit the curve on Miller's Ridge a little too fast, that I'd miss the black ice, that I'd swerve, flip, and bleed. I was in that ditch for nearly 11 hours. The doctor said I died twice in the ambulance. Broken ribs, punctured lung, skull fracture. I shouldn't have made it, but I did. In the hospital, I started hearing things. Nothing wild at first, just whispers, breaths in my ear when no one was around, lights flickering when I thought about her, machines reacting to my rage. They thought it was trauma. The nurses brought in a counselor, but she couldn't look me in the eyes. No one could. Except the night nurse, Sarah. She was the first to say it, quietly, as she adjusted my IV. Something came back with you, she whispered. Not scared, just respectful. It's inside you now. I didn't ask what and I didn't need to. I could feel it, coiled in my bones, prowling my nerves, feeding on something I hadn't named yet. It wasn't love. It wasn't hate. It was balance. Cosmic, black, holy balance. I went home about a month later. Mel hadn't visited me while I was in the hospital. Not once. My apartment smelled like bleach and Febreze. Shed cleaned it top to bottom. Erased me. Her closet was empty, her side of the bed cold. She had left a note on the fridge. Glad you're okay. Please don't contact me. I need to move on. We both do. That night, I stood in the dark and thinking, and I whispered her name. The lights flickered. My teeth ached. Something inside me smiled. The dreams then started. I saw her in them, every night, not doing anything sinister, just living, laughing, moving on, as if I hadn't existed, as if she didn't nearly kill me. And every morning I woke up closer to her. Not metaphorically, physically. One morning I woke up in her driveway. No idea how I got there. No memory of the night, just the taste of dirt in my mouth and a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Another time I woke up in her closet. She didn't see me. She didn't know. And I was sleeping through it all. By week 3 I stopped fighting whatever it was. Whatever had taken root in me, it was efficient, cold, brilliant. It started collecting data, passwords, phone numbers, work schedules, her boyfriend's address. I wasn't stalking anymore, I was studying. One night I whispered again, but not her name this time. I said, make her feel it. The room dropped 10 degrees. The lights went out. I smiled. I don't remember killing him. Not really. Just flashes. His eyes wide in the mirror. The sound of his ribs cracking. The soft, wet pop of something important breaking. The color of his bedroom carpet. Ugly brown, now darker. I woke up back in my bed. Clean. Calm. On the news. Local man found dead in apparent home invasion. No suspects. Mel looked wrecked. Pale. Hollow. Her perfect little life crumbling. Good. But I wasn't done. She started seeing me. Not in person. In mirrors. Windows. Reflections. She called me. First time in months. Said she needed to talk. I met her at a public park. Bright day. Birds chirping. People everywhere. She said, I feel like something's watching me. I just smiled and asked, "Do you think it's him?" She went white. I never meant. What, you never meant to leave me in that ditch? Silence. You never meant to erase me like I was some mistake you made in your 20s. Still nothing. I came back for you, Mel. Her eyes welled up, but I saw no apology in them. Just fear. Perfect. You ever feel someone's soul collapse? It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. Like a sigh or a decision being made. That night she tried to kill herself. Pills and wine. Texted her mama goodbye and everything. She didn't die. But something in her did. Good. Now she sees me everywhere. I don't even have to go anymore. She hears my voice in her vents. Sees me in static. Smells my cologne in locked rooms. She sleeps with lights on. Salt in her windows. And a Bible under her pillow. Nothing helps. Because I'm not a ghost. And not a hallucination. I'm what she made. I'm every version of me she killed with her lies. And I will never leave. I'm writing this not as a warning. I'm writing this as a promise. To anyone out there who thinks they can ruin someone and walk away clean, we remember. We watch. And if you're not careful, one day we'll come back. Different. Story 10. I went hiking to clear my head. Something out there wasn't right. I don't need sympathy. I just want to know if anyone else has seen it. Not something weird in the woods. Not lights. Not a noise. Not a shadow that could have been a bear. I mean it. And I need to know if I'm not alone. It started because I was trying to get my head right. I'd been spiraling, work stress, relationship stuff, insomnia. I figured some time in the woods would help. I wasn't trying to be off-grid or anything dramatic. Just a solo hike. 2 days. 1 night. There's a loop trail about 4 hours from where I live. Long enough to feel remote. Short enough that I could still get back to my car before dark if things went sideways. The trail isn't popular. No campsites. No ranger stations. Just a faded wooden sign at the head that says OK Ben Loop in flaking white letters. The trail map nailed beside it was water damaged and sun bleached. All the landmarks were faded out. But I wasn't worried. I'd hiked deeper places. I packed light. 1-person tent. Water filter. Pocket knife. Headlamp. Notebook. And a camera. Because lately I've had the sense I'm supposed to document things. Like someone or something is keeping score. The first 3 hours were uneventful. The air was clean damp with early spring rot, trees still bare but budding. The sound of wind through the higher branches was calming. For a while I felt good. That changed when I passed a rotted tree split in half like it had been cracked open by lightning, but there was no burn mark, no blackened wood, just splinters and peeled bark, like something had burst out from inside. That's when I heard the first sound. It wasn't a branch snapping or an animal rustling. It was a hoof hitting soil. Deliberate, weighted, close. I turned and scanned the woods behind me. Nothing. No birdsong either. No bugs. Just wind and something watching. I kept walking. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Every 20 steps or so I looked back. And that's when I saw it. Not directly, just movement between the trees. A shape too pale, too tall. I told myself it was just a deer. But even then, something felt off. It wasn't afraid of me. And its neck was wrong. Too long, like it had been stretched. I moved faster. By dusk, I'd reached a small clearing near a creek bed and set up camp. I didn't eat, didn't write in the journal, just listened. No frogs, no crickets, no wind anymore. Just the slow, steady crunch of something walking the perimeter of the clearing. I didn't sleep. I kept my knife close and my light off. Every time I turned toward the sound, it stopped. Like it wanted me to know it was out there, but not where. Just before sunrise, I caught a glimpse of it again, standing between 2 trees, still as death. Its legs were jointed the wrong way, bent backwards at the knees. I blinked, and it was gone. I packed up before the sun had fully risen and got back on the trail. But something was different now. The path didn't match what I'd seen the day before. It curved wrong. The ground sloped when it shouldn't have. I checked my compass. It spun once, then steadied pointing northwest. Problem was, the trail was supposed to loop east. I followed it anyway. That's when I found the carcass. A deer, or what had been one. except its body was arranged perfectly, legs splayed outward in a star shape, ribcage peeled open, head missing. Its spine was twisted into a spiral, and in the center of the spiral was a small pile of stones stacked like a cairn, on top a single antler. Not broken off, plucked. I don't know how I knew that, I just knew. I kept walking. The next 2 hours were a blur. Every turn led me deeper, not closer. Trees looked the same. My steps sounded wrong, like they weren't echoing right, like the forest had too much space inside it. And then I saw the cave. It was just a hole in the hillside. Nothing dramatic. No bones. No markings. But it wasn't there yesterday. I should have turned around. Should have run. But I was already past the point of logic. I stepped inside. It wasn't deep. Just a narrow tunnel of moss-covered stone and something that smelled like wet copper. A few feet in, I found scratch marks on the wall. Long, vertical gouges. 4 to a set, like claw marks. Then I heard it. The same hoofstep sound, but closer now. Behind me, I turned, and it was there, standing at the cave entrance. Too tall for a deer, too wrong for a man. Its eyes didn't reflect my light, they absorbed it. Its mouth was stretched, open, no teeth, just a ring of skin like a second pair of lips pulling back too far. And it smiled. Not with joy, not with recognition, with intent. I raised my knife. It didn't move. Instead, it spoke. Not out loud. Inside my head. A voice like branches snapping underwater. You see now. I didn't respond. It didn't need me to. You see, but you do not know. I backed away. My legs didn't want to move, but something in me remembered how. I got maybe 10 paces before it lunged. Not at me. Around me. It passed through the cave like smoke, like light bending around a black hole. When I stumbled back into the trees, it was already gone. But something in the forest had shifted. The air wasn't right. The trees leaned in too close. My shadow was wrong. It bent toward the sun. I ran until I couldn't, collapsed somewhere near a ravine, dry heaving and sobbing. My compass was gone. My knife too, just my bag and a camera. I don't remember taking a photo, but there was one on the roll when I got home. A blurry shape. White, bent, staring. Antlers like fingers. Legs like broken stilts. And in the corner of the frame, carved into the tree behind it, a symbol. A ring of thorns around a figure bent backward. Smiling. I burned the film. But it didn't matter. Because something followed me back. And I know this because last night I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of hooves on hardwood. They circled my bed 3 times. And then I heard it whisper again. You see, but you do not know. And when I turned on the light, there were antlers hanging above my door. Still wet. Story 11. I am a modern explorer. It's not a job I would recommend. The internet is filled with stories about people who clip out of reality and into somewhere else. Terms like backrooms/states/woods are common on Reddit, and I'm not here to argue semantics with you. I call them fairy pockets, but even that is just a term I made up, so use what you like. There are no word police. Not that I have found yet. There are no set rules by which one enters a fairy pocket. Sometimes you just slip in by accident, though there's usually an easy way out if you know what to look for. Something that will just not look right and help you pull yourself back to reality. It's hard to explain. My job is that I find them, go into them, and figure out what, if anything, is valuable there, and then sell that information to governments or private businesses. You would be shocked at the amount of natural resources some of these places hold. I can assure you that the Iraq War was not about oil without a shadow of a doubt, but they're always dangerous. So it's a tough call on whether or not they're worth it, and thank God, not mine to make. Usually, you can find some idiots willing to buy your dangerous claim for at least enough to break even, unless it's Rockport. Nobody even tries to claim that God-forsaken place anymore. Today I'm just gonna tell you about a few places I found, and then if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them. So without further ado, let's start with Pittsburgh's Infinite City. There is this one place in downtown Pittsburgh, about 2 blocks from the old US Steel building, where if you follow a complicated set of turns and steps, which I can't disclose due to an NDA, you will find yourself in a near-endless, entirely abandoned cityscape of almost identical brick tenements. It, as far as I could tell, served no real practical use to the people I sold it to, but mine is not to reason why. They paid well, and I don't question money on general principle. That said, the thing that struck me as most strange about this place wasn't how empty it was or who built it, being a total mystery. I always have assumed something built these places. No, the strangest part of this was that every single sign or any other piece of writing I could find in this city was written in what I eventually identified as a 14th century dialect of Polish. That's a nice and simple one. Not really scary, though I confess, all those empty buildings did get eerie. But most of the things I find are like that, a little off-putting perhaps, but not anything special. And this memoir is dedicated more to my horrific experiences. After all, they're the ones that make for good stories. Now some places like that feel creepy but are fine. Others, like what we'll talk about next, feel fine but are potentially dangerous. If you've ever taken a road trip through Kansas, you'll know how flat it is, but perhaps one or two of you while driving have thought you saw a mountain way off in the distance. You probably stopped and shook your head, maybe rubbed your eyes, and it was gone. Good, it doesn't exist, and it can't hurt you, unless you drive exactly 4 miles over the speed limit for 20 minutes while staring at the mountain. Then take a sharp left onto a dirt road between 2 cornfields, with a wooden sign on an archway over it. The sign may or may not say anything, that tends to change for some reason. The dirt farm road will soon turn into a paved highway, and you will be in Haskell County. It's a nice place if you don't mind the smell of sulfur. It's a geothermal hotspot, and the entire place stinks of eggs. The locals are nice, hard-working folks who will give you the shirt off their back, and really are fine people. But take my advice, and don't go to any of the churches in the county. They all have the same preacher who tells the same sermon every week, like a recording, and the people can get violent if you ever look bored during it. Other than that, it's a great place to live, with property values that can't be beat on account of the fact that I am fairly certain it's still 1973 there. A few hundred miles away, there's one place in the Midwest. Again, for legal reasons, I can't tell exactly how to find. What I can tell is that it's a small regional airport in a big-ish city, that's all I can say. The vending machines all sell products that aren't in business anymore, but I am not entirely sure if that's supernatural or just some strange gimmick on the part of the airport management. What is weird is that if you walk into one specific woman's bathroom on a Tuesday, there will be an elevator at the far end of the room past the last sink. It takes you up through 99 floors, 98 of which are identical open-plan office space. You cannot see the skyscraper from outside the airport, and actually some planes fly right through where it should be. Every floor is the same, laid out in long rows of desks with big box computers and off-white landline phones with wood grain siding, each station manned by workers dressed in business casual, talking on phones and generally doing what you'd expect from a call center. The only issue is that they are speaking exclusively in dead languages, Latin, Proto-Finnic, Occitan. I even heard some Akkadian when I was there. Honestly, it's the most well-managed office I've ever seen. Everyone works hard, and nothing ever goes majorly wrong, which I suspect has something to do with the fact that as far as I could tell, there were no managers to screw things up. I went up to floor 99, but decided against floor 100. You see, 99 was a waiting room like you'd find at a doctor's office, and to access floor 100, you had to take the stairs. The sounds coming from up there cannot be described, and I do mean cannot. I have tried repeatedly, and it only leads to my having a seizure. Not wanting to repeat that, I will leave them to your imagination. A buddy of mine who is a priest suggested that I had found purgatory, and perhaps he was right. I'm no theologian, so I'll leave that one to the church. There is an area in San Francisco where you can see what I think is Atlantis, where Alcatraz should be, but I haven't figured out how to get there yet. And there is a way to get to the moon from Houston without NASA being involved. But by far the weirdest fairy pocket I ever found was Mount Prince Nelson National Park in West Virginia. It's a beautiful place, by the way, wonderful hiking and some absolutely stunning views of the mountains. But I don't recommend you take your kids. It is by far the most dangerous place I have ever been, and I lived in Chicago for 3 months. Long story, I was trying to figure out where all the damned clowns kept coming from. But I digress. Prince Nelson is about 700 square miles, located within an area of West Virginia no larger than a Walmart parking lot, which coincidentally is how you get there. Follow the steps correctly, and where the main doors are, a stone arch will appear with an NPS ranger who charges you 42 cents as an entry fee and hands you a waiver to sign in the reasonably likely event that you die in the park. There are miles and miles of roads, both paved and unpaved, and a core area around a lake that contains the majority of the tourist stuff. It's more or less safe on account of the National Park Service maintaining a round-the-clock watch on the perimeter that would make the Marines look sloppy. And the flight of F-14 Eagle fighter jets flying 24/7 hot laps around the area is a great comfort, but we weren't paid to be comfortable, and our bosses wanted us deeper in the park and off-trail. Once you get outside of the patrolled area, like we were, things take a turn. Everything, and I do mean everything, wants to kill you. There are beetles insect the size of Beetle's car for starters. The cool part, however, is the dinosaurs that roam free in the park. Side note, that hole they can't see you if you don't move. Thing is bull. Ask me how I know. It's a rainforest, so the backwoods camping isn't easy because hacking your way off trail is a nightmare even without the venomous trees and psychic frogs. But I have to say, it really is beautiful, puts Yellowstone to shame on a bad day, and that's saying it mildly. When I first went to Meear Prince Nelson, I was part of a team of specialists called in by the National Park Service to figure out why they kept getting paperwork from their employees there despite no knowledge of it existing. We spent about 6 months figuring out how to get in, and that's when things started to go badly wrong. Our team lead, an older guy named Donald, was the first to die. He had taken watch around our camp on the first night after we left the safe zone, and some kind of big ape-looking thing came out of the woods and attacked. Beat poor Donnie half to death before we were able to kill it, and he was dead by the time we got him back to a ranger station for medevac. We had a job to do and the pay was good, so we pushed on, deeper into the woods, where the 9 surviving men of our team got knocked down to 5 on the 3rd day by some kind of screaming fog, though all things considered, it wasn't so bad, as it also killed the T-Rex that was chasing us. Jacoby, one of the newbies, went nuts that night and started talking about how he had communed with a goddess at the center of the mountain in his sleep, and that he needed to go out and join her amidst the rocks lest all reality be consumed. I had to put him down with my .45 before the crazy spread to the rest of the team, which might be my least favorite part of this damn job. The remaining 4 of us found an old cabin nearby and decided to hold up for the night. By the next morning we were down to 3. I hadn't gotten to Jacoby in time, I guess. We reached the decision that we were going to try and make our way back to the safe zone after a short debate. I always try to be democratic where possible. So we started back. When we had been walking for around 7 hours, Rodriguez, who was on point, signaled a halt. He said he thought he had heard a twig breaking about 100 yards to our right. He was right. 2 worse luck. If he hadn't stopped, maybe that prick wouldn't have been able to line up his shot. The arrow took Rodriguez in the chest, sending him to the ground. Me and O'Leary opened up with our weapons in the direction of the archer, but I don't think we hit him. Rodriguez would have survived had the arrow not been poisoned, but he was already turning green and bleeding from his eyes by the time I got the bandage over the wound. I gave him last rites by sticking a stake through his heart and zip-tying a cross to his right hand so he wouldn't come back as anything unnatural. Then the 2 of us left and set off again in the direction of home. O'Leary and I made it a long way that day without stopping and ended up camping close enough to the safe zone that we were fairly confident in making it there the next day. I took first watch and chewed coffee grounds to stay awake, as I had no doubts that we were still being hunted. The attack came sometime around 0:30 when I got a feeling on the back of my neck that I was being watched. I have learned to listen to these feelings, and it's why I'm still alive. Diving for the ground, the arrow just narrowly missed me, slamming into a tree a few yards behind. O'Leary was awake now and scrambling for his rifle while I fired blindly into the trees from cover. We were unlikely to make it back without getting rid of this hunter, so I signaled for him to cover me as I crawled away from our camp. It took about 10 minutes or so before I found his tracks. 2 muddy boot prints and a Snickers wrapper gave away where he had been standing, and a trail of greenish-blue blood leading away from the spot told me one of us had hit the bastard. O'Leary and I stalked him for about half a mile before we found him collapsed by a creek bed, panting heavily. A handsome young man dressed in bright orange hunting gear. The only sign he wasn't human was the metallic red hair and his almost neon green eyes. He cussed me out in what might have been an early ancestor of Welsh, before O'Leary blew his brains all over the forest floor. I wasn't sure that would stop him for long, so just to be safe, I hog-tied him before we left. O'Leary quit this job after we made it back to civilization. I can't blame him. The last I heard, he had become a Buddhist monk and lived up some mountain in Colorado. I just hoped it wasn't anywhere near Rockport. That is one pocket that even I won't go to. But the pay from the National Park Service was more than enough for me to retire on, had I wanted to. So there are certainly perks to this job. Why do I still do it? I would love to get philosophical, but Frankly, I just like it. It tickles the part of the human spirit that first pushed man to sail across oceans or fly to the moon. And like those great explorers of the past, I'm not sure if I could stop even if I wanted to. It has its hooks in me and won't let go. I have other stories, of course. Might even post them later, but these were a few that stood out to me. I will try to answer any questions, but given the number of NDAs and ancient blood oaths I've had to sign over the years, I make no promises about how much I can deliver. That said, if this job sounds fun to you, or the money sounds like a great way to get rich quick, I really do not recommend you take it up. People like that don't tend to last long. And for the love of all that is holy, if you are in Colorado and see a sign for a town called Rockport, turn around. Story 12. The day my brother died, something took his place. I was only 12 when Adam passed away. I remember his death with crystal clarity. It's my punishment for failing to save him. We were playing in the woods behind our house, venturing much further than our parents allowed when it happened. The incident that changed both of our lives forever. Hey Max, do you think gorillas could talk? You know, like if they really tried 100%. That question still sticks out in my mind. Such an odd thing to ask, but he was only 10 years old, so I can't fault him for it. No, I said, staring into the canopy overhead. They would done it already. Well, what if? Whoa, look at that, Adam shouted, pointing his finger. I looked in its direction, and I could immediately make out what appeared to be a ravine, a deep cut entrenched into the earth. To a couple of preteen boys, that was like discovering a new continent. Adam raced over to it without a second's hesitation. I followed suit, albeit a bit more hesitantly. Adam and I stood at the edge of the crevice, peering into the darkness within. It seemed deep, probably 30 or 40 feet, if I had to guess. Even in the evening light peppering the ground through the trees, we couldn't see the bottom. Max, go get a rock. I want to see how... What happened next has haunted me for the last 13 years of my life. I watched helplessly as the ground Adam was standing on crumbled away. His eyes grew wide and frantic, and all the color drained from his face in the split second that the realization hit him. He desperately flailed his arms, searching for something, anything, to grab onto, but ultimately, he found nothing. I was such a coward. I was in so much shock that I couldn't move. I could only look on as Adam fell. If only I'd reacted quicker. If I had just snatched his hand in time, I could have saved him. Instead, I'm left with the constant reminder of my inaction. Time seemed to slow as Adam fell further and further into the depths. His scream barely registered in my ears before I heard it, that nauseating thump that still lives in my nightmares. Words can't express how horrified I was. Adam had been standing beside me one moment. Then the next, he was just gone. Panic surged through me as the severity of the situation finally sank in. Adam, are you okay? I shouted, my voice shaky. I waited for a reply that I knew wasn't going to come. Only silence emanated from the crevice, until it didn't. I was about to run for help when I heard something. A faint, wet ripping noise like flesh being stripped from bone drifted up from the trench. I stood, rooted to the spot. A dizzying cocktail of curiosity and dread settled into my stomach as I strained my ears to listen. And then, just as quickly as they had started, the noises stopped. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest when a new sound broke the silence. Max. Adam's voice called my name. I should have been relieved to hear that mais. But I wasn't. It felt wrong. The inflection wasn't quite right, and the letters were spoken too far apart. It sounded like something was mimicking Adam. Something that was just learning how to use his voice. I found myself unable to speak. I couldn't run. I couldn't scream. I couldn't look away. All I could do was keep my eyes glued to the darkness as a low scuffling met my ears. It didn't take long for me to realize what that noise was coming from. It sounded as if something was scaling the side of the trench. Something big, and after what felt like an eternity, I was proven right. A hand grasped the soil beside my feet, finding purchase on the edge of the drop-off. Another hand followed, and soon a head poked up from the abyss. I watched as Adam hoisted himself up, brushed the dirt off of his pants, and grinned at me. I can't explain how in that moment, but I knew with 100% certainty that the boy standing beside me was not my brother. He didn't look any different. No noticeable changes aside from a bit of smeared blood at the side of his mouth. But his eyes, there was a manic darkness in them that wasn't there before, like something sinister lurked just below the surface. "What's wrong, Max? Why didn't you answer?" "I thought you left," Adam said. gazing at me expectantly. How? How what? Adam asked, cocking his head to the side like a curious dog. The longer Adam stared at me, the more uneasy I became. It felt as if we were playing a game of cat and mouse, and he'd backed me into a corner. How did you climb back up? How are you standing here right now? I watched you fall. My blood turned to ice as Adam smirked at me again. It wasn't that deep. I didn't get hurt, see? He said, spinning around. I didn't have time to react before his body stiffened, and he turned in the direction of our house. It's getting dark. We should go home. And with that, he took off into a dead sprint, leaving me standing there to process what I'd just seen. Mom and Dad either didn't notice, or they chalked it up to Adam getting older. But I knew there were too many subtle imperfections to miss. The way he ate all of his peas when he used to hate them. How he didn't put up a fuss when brushing his teeth. Wearing his glasses when he used to abhor the thought. But the worst, most significant change happened at night. I was terrified to sleep in the same room as Adam. I had begged our parents to let me spend the night on the couch or on the floor in their bedroom, but they wouldn't allow it. Just the thought of being stuck alone with him nearly brought me to tears. I tried to avoid looking at him, to hide under the covers and pretend that everything was okay. I prayed that I would make it through the night without incident, but that didn't happen. I was trembling under the covers, trying to calm my nerves, when I heard it. Something skittered across the floor. Then I felt a presence looming over me. I can't explain how I knew that he was there. I could just feel him hovering, watching me. I held my breath, too scared to utter so much as a peep, and then he spoke. Warm, musty breath seeped through the covers and into my ear. It reeked of rot and decay, the smell of death. I wanted to gag, but I was frozen in fear as the words registered. I know that you know. Keep your mouth shut, and I won't have to hurt you. Then he scampered away, back to his side of the room. I didn't get a wink of sleep that night. I was too on edge to let my guard down for even a second. Mom and Dad commented on how tired I looked, but I brushed them off. Adam was lurking in the background, eyeing me, waiting for me to slip up. But I was careful, and for the next month, it turned my life into a living nightmare. I was constantly exhausted. My grades took a nosedive. My relationships suffered. People noticed. Mom and Dad took me to a doctor, but he recommended more sleep and melatonin. That did the trick for a while, until the night that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was fast asleep thanks to the medication, when something woke me up. I immediately knew what it was. I was paralyzed with dread the moment my eyes opened. Adam was standing directly over me. He wasn't whispering, just standing there, still as a statue. His expression was blank, and those eyes, they looked dead, like the eyes of a fish. We stayed there for what felt like an eternity, Adam looming over me, while I lay in bed, too afraid to even blink. Then, without saying a word, Adam dropped to the floor. I could hear him crawling, shuffling on the hardwood, but I couldn't see him. That terrified me more than anything, not knowing where he was. I wouldn't have to worry about that for long, because a moment later, his face popped up at the foot of my bed. Those cold, lifeless eyes held me in their daze. I couldn't look away even for a second dot, and just when I thought that my heart might explode out of my chest, Adam's face disappeared from view again. I could hear him. He was crawling beneath my bed. His nails scratched the floor as he dragged his body forward. I kept expecting his arm to shoot up from the darkness, for broken fingernails to rake across my flesh and choke the life from my veins. But that didn't happen. Instead, Adam stayed there, lying still. An eerie silence blanketed the room once again, and the only audible noise in the entire house was Adam's ragged breathing, directly below my head. Then a wet gurgle seeped up through the bed frame. I'm going to come back for you someday. You'll end up just like him. I stayed awake for hours, those words rattling in my head, waiting for the moment that he would choose to end my life. But although my heart hammered harder than it ever had before, and the adrenaline running through my system was enough to put down a horse, I must have drifted off to sleep eventually, because the next thing I remember, I opened my eyes to find Mom frantically shaking me awake. Max, wake up. Where's your brother? I groggily sat up, rubbing my eyes, until the events from the previous night came crashing down on me like a freight train. I trembled as I met my mother's worried gaze, and summoning all of my strength, I pointed down below the bed. Mom didn't respond. She knelt, leaving me holding my breath, shaking uncontrollably, expecting a clawed, gnarled hand to grab her at any moment. But it didn't. Instead, Mom's face began to turn red as she re-emerged. Max, this isn't funny. Your brother is missing and now is not the time for practical jokes. Those words, they were like music to my ears. I know how messed up that is. I know that I should have been concerned. This was my little brother. For fuck's sake, I should have felt some kind of worry or panic or fear, but I didn't. Instead, I felt a sense of overwhelming relief. They found Adam's body the next day. His corpse was lying in the trench where it had fallen over a month prior. The coroner was perplexed. According to him, Adam's body showed signs that it had been deteriorating for weeks. The level of decay was too advanced for him to have died mere hours earlier. To this day, I still can't explain what that thing was, or what happened to my brother. Sometimes it feels like a twisted fever dream, but I know that what I experienced all those years ago was real, and I'm convinced that whatever took over my Adam's body that day is still out there. Last night, while staying at my parents' house for the first time in months, I visited the crevice. I don't know why I did it. I think part of me still needed closure, but that's not what I found. Because as I stared into the darkness, I swear that I heard Adam's voice calling my name from the abyss. Even now, it's inside my head, beckoning me. I know that whatever controlled Adam then has made good on its promise. I don't know how much time I have left, but I know it won't be long before I join it in the dark and let it take me. Story 13. I saw something on the flight cameras that shouldn't exist, and now reality is unraveling. This happened a few days ago, and I haven't slept since. I don't know if this is the right place to post, but I need to tell someone before I lose my grip completely. I was on a red-eye flight from Tokyo to Los Angeles. About 9 hours in, I couldn't sleep, so I started flipping through the in-flight entertainment system. You know how some planes have exterior cameras? This one had 3: nose cam, tail cam, and belly cam. I figured it would be cool to watch the clouds from above. I started with the nose cam. Nothing weird, just a serene view of stars and cloud cover. The edge of the earth barely visible under a navy blue sky. Peaceful, almost hypnotic. Then I switched to the tail cam. That's when things started to feel off. It showed the rear of the plane, the wings stretching into the emptiness behind us. But there was this faint distortion just behind the aircraft, almost like a smudge or a shimmer, like heat rising from asphalt. It kept flickering in and out. I thought maybe it was turbulence or a glitch in the camera feed. But then the shimmer twitched, not in a way that looked natural, more like a single frame of something vastly larger, trying to force itself into visibility, like it didn't belong in 3 dimensions. I stared for a long time. The shimmer didn't go away. It moved, just slightly, and then I swear to God the stars behind it blinked out. Not like clouds passed over them, like they were eaten. I backed out and tried the belly cam. It showed the earth far below, speckled with clouds and the faint glimmer of ocean. But now there was something else. A shape. Dark, massive, coiled like a nest of serpents made of shadow. At first I thought it was just a weird cloud formation. But clouds don't move like that. They don't twist and pulse and bend space around them. The edges of the shape weren't even solid, more like teeth gnashing behind a curtain. Then the screen glitched. For a fraction of a second it showed something else entirely. Not the earth, not the sky, but an eye. Wide and deep and old. Not metaphorically old. Before earth was earth kind of old. The kind of eye that has seen stars born and devoured, and still hungers. And it was looking directly at me. I tore off my headphones and slammed the screen dark. My heart was pounding. I looked around the cabin. Everyone else seemed normal, some asleep, some watching movies, some reading. No one was panicking. But I felt it. Like the pressure in the cabin had shifted, ever so slightly, like the laws that held this world together had loosened by a millimeter. I got up and went to the lavatory, splashed cold water on my face. I told myself it was a hallucination, sleep deprivation, high altitude. But when I came out, the lighting in the cabin had changed. It was subtle, a little too green, like fluorescent lighting in a hospital. And the flight attendants, I swear they weren't the same. Their faces looked stretched, off, like their smiles didn't reach their eyes, which now gleamed just a little too bright. I sat back down, tried to breathe, tried not to look at the screen again, but I couldn't help it. I tapped the tail cam one more time. The sky was wrong, too dark. The stars were moving, orbiting something unseen. The shimmer was back, bigger now. And then, God help me, the camera feed zoomed in on its own. It pushed through static, through corrupted frames and showed the shape again, but closer, clearer. I saw limbs. Not arms or legs, just endless appendages, bending in spirals, folding into themselves. It wasn't outside the plane. It was wrapped around it, and smiling. Not with a mouth, but with its presence. I could feel it pressing against the edge of my thoughts, like oil seeping through a crack in my skull. The feed cut out. The lights flickered. The captain came on the speaker, but the voice wasn't his. I can't explain how I knew that. It just wasn't him. The voice said something in a language I can't reproduce. Half static, half whisper, then silence. We landed eventually, or at least they said we did. But something's wrong. I'm back home, but things don't feel right. My reflection lags for a second when I move. The moon doesn't look the same. It's too close. Or maybe just watching back. I haven't slept. I don't think I can anymore. And sometimes I hear something crawling above the ceiling. Not in it, above it. Somewhere outside of everything. If you fly soon, don't look at the cameras. Please. If you see it, it sees you too. Story 14. I worked as a security guard at Area 51. There's a level of anxiety that comes with starting a new job that I just hate. Not sure if it's just the process of learning what to do, the pressure of proving myself to new coworkers, or just the stress of being in a new environment, but it's been a constant across every job I've ever taken. This newest one piled that anxiety onto the max though, and I don't think I'll be going back after what happened last night. To be perfectly clear, if I end up hitting send on this and you're reading it right now, well, it's not really up to me if I go back to work or not. They're probably going to ship me off to some black site that's further off the map than my current position. 1 week here and I've learned all those conspiracy theories Americans have about Area 51 barely begin to scratch the surface, so might as well go for broke and tell the whole story, right? I've been in the Air Force for about 5 years now, and this was supposed to be my latest post. Something my commanding officer said was a breeze, which I honestly had doubts about considering I've been in Germany for the last 2 years, and it was, for lack of a better description, the easiest shit I've ever done. They said it would be just as easy, except I would get to be back on home turf in the desert of Nevada. Guard duty isn't that hard anyway, right? Assuming you're guarding humans. My first day started out like any other I've had. Get to the base, find the CO there, and get my orders directly from them. They assigned me to this older officer as my trainer, Mills, and he started leading me through the main building towards our post. According to him, all we had to do was keep an eye on the security cams for the entire place and notify higher-ups if anything looked out of place. The base itself was, well, what you expect from a base in the middle of the desert. A few big nondescript buildings surrounded by fences with a healthy amount of razor wire. I honestly wasn't expecting much when I got in. But imagine my surprise when Mills told me to hop into a golf cart so we could get to the monitor room. I mean, I always figured there was more to Area 51 than what we could see from the outside. But then we drove at least 4 miles through this huge tunnel on a pretty steep incline. He was talking to me the whole time, asking me if I had found a place to live nearby yet, and telling me about staying away from the Vegas Strip on my off days. Seemed like we were driving for hours through a long concrete tunnel, my stomach getting more and more uneasy with every passing foot, when we finally stopped in front of a small door built into the side of the tunnel. You're lucky, kid. This has to be the cushiest job in the entire US military. We just watch these screens and give a little check in every other hour. Sometimes they'll have us do rounds and check doors. Otherwise, I get to sit here and work on my Sudoku puzzles for as long as I want while getting top dollar for it. He said to me when we entered. The room was surprisingly big, with almost the 2 entire walls filled floor to ceiling with monitors that we were supposed to keep track of. Some showed empty gray rooms with nothing but abandoned desks. Others were static shots of desert sand, another with the exterior of the buildings we entered through. Then one in the upper right corner caught my eye. "What in the world is that?" I asked, pointing to the screen in question. Mills gave a chuckle, pulling up a chair at the small desk and grabbing the nearby mouse. With a few clicks, he enlarged the image for me to see better. In the middle of a small all-white room sat a table. On that table was one small body, and at first I honestly thought it was a child. Maybe the kid of a superior officer having a nap or something while their dad was working, I don't fucking know. Then when Mills made the picture bigger, I noticed the odd proportions of it. A massive head, long arms and legs with a small torso that seemed barely strong enough to hold up the rest of it. The gray, flush skin was nearly a pale white that looked sickly against the walls of the room. "You're fucking with me, right?" I asked, looking back at Mills. He smiled, shaking his head and putting the screen back on multi-view. "Nope. Welcome to orientation day, kid." that there is an original," he said, taking a seat and pulling out a massive thermos before beginning to pour the contents into a mug. "What did they tell you when you were assigned here?" "Nothing, pretty much," I said, mind swirling. There was no way he just confirmed the existence of aliens, so casually. It was like showing me an animal in a zoo exhibit for him. All he was doing was smiling, watching as I tried to reconcile what I was seeing on the screen. Scanning through different views from the cameras, I began to notice even more odd sights. A massive disc and one that had tons of text set up all around it. A mechanic using an arc welder on one side. Another view showed something in another room. It looked like a concentrated ball of darkness, the occasional tendril reaching outward towards the door before a light would come on, causing it to snap back into place. Then another room, with one lone person sitting in a chair, dressed like your everyday civilian with just a shit-eating grin on his face. All of it looked so out of place to the regular human, but Mills was smiling at me like it was just another day. "So what is all this?" "Well, what have you heard about Roswell 1947? He shot back at me. I shrugged as he continued. "Doppelgangers, dark matter, all kinds of weird shit out there that the regular Joe doesn't get to know about. Come on, want some coffee?" "So you mean all the little green men cartoons and shit like that? All real? Like not even an exaggeration or change to how they look?" I sat next to him, taking the mug of coffee he offered and sipping slow. It burned a little, but that burn was helping to distract me from the near existential crisis going on in my head at the moment. "Best way to hide something is to do it in plain sight," he retorted. "And they're not green, as you can see, more of a gray pallor, though they look a lot like a corpse in most lighting. That one there is perfectly healthy though, far as we can tell." "How can you tell? It looks dead." "Well, we don't have anything that can pierce its skin, and of course vitals aren't going to be the same as what we measure for ourselves, but they have picked up brainwaves. From as far as 60 feet away, even, that's why that room has lead walls 3 feet thick. Damn thing will start talking into your brain if you're close enough," he muttered, his face flickering for a moment from being playful to a look of horror. "Telepathy?" I asked. He only nods. Some Professor X shit if I've ever seen it. Went through it myself on one of my first guard duties here. They didn't have the walls thick enough yet, and when I passed by on rounds it started screaming in my head. I nearly choked on the hot coffee, earning myself a coughing fit in the process. What did it say? Begged me to let it go. Then, when it realized I couldn't do that, it started begging me to kill it. It hasn't moved from that table in the almost 80 years it's been here, so they think it's paralyzed or something. Totally unable to move. Probably happened in the crash. Was like it was reading my mind though, because I barely got the thought out and it was screaming curses at me for letting it live. Hell, like I have a choice. Uncle Sam would have me erased from existence if I did that." He looked around the monitors. "Can't say I blame it for asking though. Must be a hell of an existence, just stuck there like that." I just couldn't compute what was happening. Somewhere in my brain was a voice going, "Well, of course aliens exist," while a whole other section was telling me this makes everything I've ever known a total lie. Why the hell did I get chosen for this post? And nothing remarkable, I haven't done anything bad to piss off superiors, so why would they put me here and shatter my entire worldview? Did someone really just hate me, or was I just another faceless rank that they tossed on the job? "Just don't let it get to you too bad, alright?" Mills said, genuine concern on his face now. "I know it's a lot to take in, but trust me, it's normal after a while. Just don't think too hard on any of it." The rest of the day was spent watching monitors and doing rounds. Between our patrols, Mills clued me in on the guests that were kept around here. The gray was obviously the big deal, but the other things on the screen were a whole other ballgame of weird. The disc thing was the ship the gray arrived in. Not too big of a surprise there. Mills said they haven't been able to crack the damn thing since the crash though. There's no door in, no visible way out, and nothing we have can get through the hull, though the guy with the arc welder gave it his best for about 3 hours before finally calling it quits. Dark matter was what he called the mass of darkness in the lighted room. Said he wasn't sure where the hell they found it, but anything that went into the dark never came out. There were at least 10 high-powered UV lamps in that room that acted as a deterrent, and apparently it could assimilate any sort of shadow or darkness, potentially using it to escape. By far the creepiest one though was the doppelganger. Mills mentioned to me that it had breached containment once before, able to nearly perfectly imitate any human it wants. About brought the entire damn place down and killed 5 guards before they got it back into a cell. It just sat there, totally rigid, upright, smiling huge with pointed inhuman teeth that gave away it wasn't one of us. Damn thing gave me a shiver every time the rotating cameras passed back over it. I went home that night unable to sleep. I know it seems cliche, but finding out we aren't alone in this universe is fucking terrifying. Like ruin your entire worldview level shit. I was raised Baptist, and even though I didn't hold to it, I started to question if God was even real. And if he was, why the hell would he make anything like what was being kept in Area 51? That was 4 days ago. The next 2 days were uneventful, for the most part. Some dumbass conspiracy theorists were trying to climb one of the fences near the upper base, but here underground in lower base, nobody knew we were there. Mills about drove me out of my mind with small talk. The guy is nice and everything, but when you're looking at aliens and deadly mimics on security cameras, it seems kind of trivial to discuss your favorite food or what was on television the night before. Last night everything went straight to hell. I got in for my first solo guard duty. Guess 3 days of training was expected to be enough time to acclimate myself to the horrors of the universe. Uncle Sam was hiding deep below the Nevada desert. Wish I had called out, if we're being honest. Around 9:30, not long after the last rays of sunlight had finally faded over the horizon, I went on my first patrol of the night, through the long tunnel down to the cells area. A long hallway, each holding cell about 30 feet apart, with most of that space filled with solid concrete between rooms. There were other guards on duty, of course. Each cell had 2 men posted outside, ready in case anything might make a break for it. From the cells it was back upstairs to upper base, an R&D where they were trying to crack the disc once again, this time with a massive laser setup that looked like it could do some gnarly damage if it was aimed elsewhere. Nothing out of the ordinary so far. When I got back to the monitor room, it was around 10:30. Going through the cameras, nothing was really out of the ordinary. The dark matter had the UV lights all the way up, a normal precaution during the night hours. Why when we were over 100 feet below ground is beyond my pay grade. Not like sunlight is reaching down here to help during the day. The doppelganger was sitting staring into the corner. I didn't stay on the camera for it too long because it made me shiver involuntarily. It was like no matter if it was facing you or not, it could always see you. I swear it was watching me more than I was watching it, and there was no fucking way it could see me. Eventually I hit the outer cameras. These things were all over the surface, disguised as cactuses, shrubbery, random rocks. Whatever could hide a camera had one in it, covering every possible inch of the surface above the real base. It was camera 46 that stood out tonight though. I don't know if I would have noticed it if it weren't a clear night. Every damn star in the sky was visible through the cams, shining bright to show the entire desert, except right up in the top left side of the camera's view. There the stars were blinking and moving ever so slightly, wavering from side to side like something was swinging them around for its own amusement. As I stared, it began to affect more of the stars nearby, nearly engulfing everything in view before finally settling in. As I looked closer, reaching for my radio to call one of the surface guards, something flashed. Every camera went out, along with the lights. The base shut down completely for a moment, darkness taking over as whatever flashed outside cut off the electricity. Before I could even reach for a flashlight, it was back on though. My face was mirrored on the black screen, a look of fear in my eyes. I booted everything back up, looking close as it took its sweet time, desperate to bring cam 46 back up so I could see what the hell was going on. My worried expression stared back at me as alarms began going off across the base. Attention! Lockdown protocols are now active. Please stay at your post and report any strange occurrences. Lockdown protocols are now active. Do not, under any circumstances, open cell doors. The screen came back on, but it wasn't on cam 46. Instead, there was my own face, still staring back at me, but this time in full HD color, rows of sharp teeth and a huge grin smiling right at me. Nearly fell back out of my chair when I realized the doppelganger was staring straight into the camera, taunting me. I don't know how the hell it took my face, whether it could just sense me there through the camera, or it just did it randomly, but it freaked me the fuck out. Wash! Wash! What the hell are you doing in there? The radio started cackling. I could barely hear it through my own racing heartbeat, one of the superior officers on the base calling for me to check in. Meanwhile, the doppelganger was still just staring at me over the screen, daring me to make some kind of move or come after it. My hand shaking, reaching for the radio, I pushed the button down to talk back. Yes sir, I'm here. My voice sounded distant, frail. The smile on the doppelganger seemed to get bigger as my fear grew. Well, what the hell happened out there? Did you see anything on the surveillance? He shot back. There was something in the sky like it was shimmering. Then a flash and everything went out. I stammered back. "Son of a bitch, they're back." He was shouting now. Who's back? Good God. You would think if there was some history of attacks on this place, they would have clued me in so I could keep an eye out. "Greys," he replied. That was when a huge explosion sent a tremor through the building. Switching through the cameras back to the one above ground, I could see that the sky wasn't empty anymore. There were at least 3 discs, just like the one being kept down here in R&D, hovering in the sky. One fired off a thin beam of light towards the ground, causing another tremor to rock the base. Lights flickered, but didn't quite go out this time. "I need someone with eyes outside to answer me. What the fuck is happening?" Another voice came over the radio. "Multiple hostiles spotted over lower and upper bases. We are under attack," someone else answered. Clicking through the screens, even more of the discs were visible over the above-ground base, already firing off shots at the buildings up there and sending them up in flames. It took everything in me not to just sit in the corner and cower, desperate to believe that this was just a bad dream. "We've got worse problems. The dark matter escaped when the power went out. It's not good," he said. "Should I run?" I was trying to come up with any kind of plan to get out of here, job be damned. The only way of escape I knew of was through the tunnel back up to upper base though. Even if I managed to escape up there, there's still the problem of these damned flying saucers that would probably evaporate me on sight. Maybe my best hope was just to stay down here, out of sight, out of mind, and wait for everything to calm down before I escape. "Ebray! HHH!" Another voice over the radio, screaming out in pain. "Help! Send reinforcements to upper base. They're coming in." I flipped the cameras over, watching as the discs let out an even larger beam of light. On the ground where they shone, more of the aliens suddenly began to appear. They looked just like the one laying on the table down the hall, but far more dangerous. A soldier moved towards them, raising his gun and firing off a couple of rounds at one of the aliens' massive head. The bullet stopped in front of it like the Matrix, hovering in midair for a moment before falling harmless to the ground below. The Grey didn't take that particularly well. Honestly, can't say I would blame it. Getting shot at is never something you just shrug off, but it simply looked at the soldier, barely even moving its head. What I saw next was something that no horror movie or years of watching Lively could have prepared me for. Something picked the shooter up, raising him into the air with invisible hands. He struggled against it, begging it to let him go. Before anyone else could step up to help though, he began folding in on himself. I couldn't hear the bones cracking over the cameras, thank God, but I could vaguely hear his screams of pain as they were caught by the small microphone. He kept folding, smaller and smaller, until he was barely the size of a baseball, compressed into an orb of flesh and pulverized bone, dripping blood as it hovered there over the ground. "Oh my God," I muttered as the Grey simply moved its head slightly, sending the flesh ball flying through the stomach of another soldier that was approaching. It punched straight through the poor guy, making a huge hole as it blew chunks of intestines and bone through his back. The Grey continued on, unimpeded, as it simply crushed anyone that got in its way. I could only watch in terror as it walked calmly through a dozen men, taking them all out without even lifting a finger. More began to beam down to the surface, following it toward its goal and joining the march. "Fall back. Air support is inbound." The radio cackled to life once more. On one of the big monitors, I could see a jet take off from one of the nearby runways, already beginning to veer back around so it could fire a shot at the discs floating nearby. 2 choppers took off around the same time, taking their own positions close by. Before I knew it, the plane and choppers all fired off their shots, aiming for the cluster of discs. A bright flash of light came from the disc closest to the ground, causing munitions to explode in midair before they could even touch the alien vessels. A small laser erupted from it next, quickly spinning around the edge of the disc. As it passed through the choppers and plane in a clean arc, they split, flames engulfing them from the subsequent explosion. It was pure hell outside. Nothing we had could possibly stand up to these things. There was no other choice but to run. Except I couldn't. The Greys would be coming through the tunnel, and that was my only way out. The other way was the cells, and after hearing about the darkness escaping, I don't think it was worth the risk. All I could do was wait. There's no point risking a direct run-in unless I wanted to die horribly. No, it was time to hunker down and wait for the storm to pass. I got up, closed the door, locked it, and tried to move what spare furniture I had in front to block it off further. If anything got in here, I only had my handgun on me, and God knows that's like hunting a bear with a water gun. Nope, got to play this smart and avoid any kind of confrontation. If only it was that easy. I kept my eyes on the monitors after that, tracing movements of the grays while keeping an eye on the lower cells. They were, well, the dark matter obviously wasn't in its cell anymore. The lights were on, but they were simply illuminating the bright white room now, where the darkness managed to go. I'm not really sure. There were a dozen guards stationed at each end of the cell block though, each shining a UV light around, trying to illuminate any shadowy corners where it could have been hiding. Another explosion made the ground under my feet tremble. The grays had broken through the tunnel now and begun a slow but deliberate descent towards the lower base. They would probably pass me in around 10 minutes, meaning I just needed to keep holding out. The other monitor showed that my time here was coming to an end though. The lights flickered when that explosion came through, plunging the cell block hallway into total darkness for just a fraction of a second. That was all the dark matter needed though. It must have used that brief time to flank around the soldiers at one end of the hall, and as they were still flinging their lights around desperately, shadows suddenly began to swallow them one by one. It was like, well, it was almost cartoonish. They were just falling right into these massive pits of darkness that would appear in the wall or floor, like a damned cartoon gag. But when they got sucked in, it looked painful, like they were entering a black hole and being torn into shreds as it pulled them in. "Hey man, let me in." Someone began knocking at my door. They sounded terrified. Can't say I blamed them. Come on. They're coming. Don't let them get me, please. "Hold on, I've got to move the furniture," I shouted back through, starting to move the chairs. "Please, Wash, hurry. They're gonna kill me if they see me," he shouted back through as I was starting to unlock the door. I froze instead, hand just about to turn the deadbolt and let him through. Slowly I turned back to the monitors, afraid that I was right about what I was about to see. The only other person on base I had spoken to and given my name were the commanding officer on upper base and Mills. Neither of them were here tonight. Sure enough, as I faced the monitor, I saw the room that the doppelganger was being held in empty. "Wash Sash, let me in," the voice shouted again. Something was off about it, like it was more than one voice saying the same thing, but talking out of turn so they didn't quite harmonize. Let me in. Let me in." All I could do was pile the chairs in front of the door again, desperately hoping it would go away. I don't know how it knew my name, but when it spoke, my blood ran cold. There was pure malice in its voice, and all I could feel was that it was going to hurt me. I got this distinct feeling that it didn't want to kill me though, only inflict as much pain as it could. My blood ran cold as I made my way back behind my desk, climbing under it and holding hands over my ears as it just kept screaming at me. The voice kept changing, turning into other people as it first begged me to let it in, then turned more violent, demanding that I open the door for it to get through. Before long it must have gotten bored though, because it stopped knocking on the door and shouting. I waited a few minutes, afraid if I came out of my hiding spot it would just be waiting there on the other side of the desk, that huge grin full of teeth, ready to devour me within seconds as soon as it saw me. I took a deep breath, crawling out little by little as the monitors above me blared with chaos. Everything on upper base was a disaster, fire all over the place. Even if I can get through the tunnel and get back there, making it through the flames was going to be a whole other challenge. God, I didn't even know if my car was crushed out there, considering all the carnage. A walk through the desert in the middle of the night was almost as dangerous as the aliens attacking from every direction. The lights flickered again as another explosion rocked the base. Looking at the monitors, I could see the grays approaching my section of the tunnel. All I could do was keep quiet, hoping that they didn't try to look in here as they continued along their warpath. Too much to ask, especially for my luck. The first gray that was leading the pack stopped in front of my door. It raised a hand, and I heard the metal begin to bend and creak. Diving back under the desk, I pulled myself in as much as I could, desperate to avoid being seen as it ripped the door from the hinges without even touching it. Pretty sure I involuntarily squealed a little when the door hit the wall, falling to the floor with an even louder bang as the gray stepped into the room. I saw its feet as it walked around for a moment, inspecting its surroundings for whatever it was looking for. It stopped in front of the monitors, staying there for the longest minute of my life as it studied them before walking back out, leading the rest of the grays forward. At that point I could only assume they were after the one that was laying in a cell down the hall. Guess aliens have the same code of no man left behind that we do. Who says we have nothing in common, right? Too bad they were slaughtering us to make sure it happened. I have to get out of here. There's no excuses now. I was exposed to the dangers outside without a door on the hinges. I had to move, fast. Looking at the monitors, the grays were far enough ahead in the tunnel that I could slip out without them noticing. I poked my head out, making sure there were no stragglers that could fold me like origami with their mind, and started my escape. Running as fast as I could towards upper base, I was quickly out of breath. The incline in here was killer, and God knows it's at least a couple of miles directly up. Nevertheless, I've got to keep trying. I managed to get maybe halfway there before I came across a body. It was slumped next to a wall, head down and blood all over the front of its uniform. As I got closer, trying to give it a wide berth, it began to cough. I paused, unsure of what my next move should be. If it's another soldier, the obvious answer is that I should help, right? But then there was the other chance nagging at the back of my mind. I've had this pit in my stomach since the run-in with the doppelganger. This guy could just be that damn thing trying to lure in prey. If it is, well, then trying to help him is a death sentence. Yetch help. A weak voice came through the coughing. Ah, hell. I can't leave them in good conscience to die on the slight chance they could be that damned monster. I know it goes against self-preservation, but I can't just leave him here. Hey man, what the hell got you? I said, moving toward him slowly. His head tilted a little, looking for where my voice was coming from. As he looked up, I could see that although he was pretty messed up, he was definitely human. His throat was slashed pretty bad though, and judging by the amount of blood everywhere, he wasn't making it out of this tunnel. Damn thing. Disguise itself as one of us. He gurgled out. The doppelganger then. It had been through here already. Shit. Was I going to have to face it when I get to upper base? Before I could think further, he kept talking. He tore out their throats with his damn teeth, ate them while they were still screaming. I tried stabbing him, but he slashed me. Oh, I don't think I'm going to make it. It's cold. Hey, stay with me, okay? I'm going to get help and come back here for you, alright? I said. Is that death? He asked, pointing towards the tunnel going to lower base. I looked forward, squinting as the light seemed to dim. It was definitely getting darker. Oh shit. Was all I could get out before a long shadow appeared in the middle of the room, steadily getting closer as it made its way out. God knows what this thing can do once it hits outside, but I wasn't about to stay around here and figure it out. I grabbed the soldier, hoisting him over my shoulder and starting to move as fast as we could. This guy was dead weight, almost cold to the touch too, not able to contribute at all to escaping certain death. We got a few feet before I tripped over one of his legs while trying to haul his limp body, dropping him as I fell to the ground. The shadow caught up, taking hold of one of his feet first, then slowly drawing the rest of him in, whatever blood he had left in there slowly seeping out as it crumpled his body into shadow. Look, it might seem like I got over it quick, but I promise, once the dark had him, there was no saving him. Instead, I ran my ass off, heading towards upper base as fast as I could in the hopes that I could outrun that primordial dark that was still devouring a man behind me. After a minute, I could tell I was getting close. Smoke began to fill the tunnel, causing me to nearly choke as I ran, gasping for breath desperately. Emerging from the tunnel almost made me want to go back in and chance it with the darkness. The discs filled the sky above and everything was on fire. I had to move carefully, afraid that they were going to vaporize me in seconds if they caught sight of me. My best bet was to go around the main building and find my way to the parking lot. If my car wasn't totaled, then I could maybe wait out the discs until they leave, then get the hell out of Dodge. It was a pretty far-fetched plan, but it was all I had at the time. Slowly, sticking to whatever shadows I could with the fear that they might devour me any second, I made my way from the tunnel entrance to the R&D building. Logically, the parking lot was on the other side of it, so I could just go straight through the building and out the other side, minimizing my risk of being seen by the discs or the Greys as they made their return trip. Inside of R&D was rough. There were various aircraft in differing stages of construction, with pieces and parts all over the place. Different testing arrays lit up on one side of the massive hangar, while down at the far end, there was something making a continuous beeping noise. Further on to my left, I could see one of the discs, the one that we had in our inventory from the old crash. The big laser cutter was still sitting nearby, lights blinking on a control panel to show it had been abandoned mid-use. A loud crash made me jump. Just up ahead, in shadows between the fluorescent bulbs, was a soldier. He had pushed something over, seemingly on the hunt for something in the huge hangar. I tried to hide from it, trying to quietly duck towards one of the walls and out of the fluorescent lights where it could see me. Unfortunately for me, this place was a mess, and I tripped over a rolling toolbox that was in the path, causing it to crash to the ground. Not sure what I expected to happen, but the creature let out a roar when it heard the noise, now aware that it wasn't alone in here. The roar was quickly stifled though, instead being replaced by a discordant voice that phased in and out of normal range, moving from male to female, adult to child, as it tried to modulate. As it's turned, I kept going to try and hide, even though it felt futile. "Come here," it shouted, moving towards where I was ducked down behind a workbench. "Son of a bitch, get over here." As it got closer, I could feel the sense of dread in my stomach growing. I couldn't make out the face, covered in shadows, but where its eyes were seemed to be shining, reflecting little bits of light like a predator's will in the dark, looking for its next meal. I don't know if it could see in the dark, but I could swear it was homing in on my with ease. "Wash, it's you," the doppelganger shouted now. Shit, it must have seen me. I had to make a run. Hell with giving my position away. If I was faster, I could make it to the far door and get the hell out of here before it had a chance to catch up. "Come here." It moved fast. Faster than I had ever seen any human move in my life, seemingly going down on all fours to run at me faster. As it closed in, I fell back, crashing to the ground beside the disc as it gained ground on me. Looking around, I grabbed my gun from its holster, leveling it at the doppelganger and firing. My aim was good, and the bullet hit it right in the face, making its head blast back for a moment. "Now why would you do that?" it said again. The voice was more discordant this time, hundreds of different inflections and tones all fighting for supremacy under the tide of noise. The prevailing feeling I got from it now wasn't just malice, it was anger. I had pissed it off, and now it really wanted to hurt me, even more so than before. I scrambled, firing off more shots into the monster. They each hit, but did nothing when it came to slowing it down. The bullets were useless, and as I looked around, my only options were crowbars, various mechanic tools, and the laser. I have no idea how to use this damn thing, so I just had to hope that when it was left here, they had already primed it so it was ready to go. The doppelganger lurched frontward, screaming at me in an ancient language I couldn't understand. I turned the dial on the console, all the way towards the top to max it out, and hit the green button that was lit up next to it. The light that came out of that thing was practically blinding. I closed my eyes, turning my head as it flashed. I could hear the damned creature screaming even louder now and smelled something burning as the laser hit it. After a moment, the light died down and I finally opened my eyes. The doppelganger lay on the ground, half its face melted and the entire torso on fire. It was twitching on the ground, still cursing me in an ancient language, but unable to keep moving. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to wait to see what happened to it. I ran, heading towards the back door and bursting through it. On the other side of the road, there was the parking lot. My car was parked in the back corner, and from the looks of it, still intact. I kept to the back wall, desperate to avoid being seen, and continued slowly moving across the road towards my car. After a moment, I finally made it, pulling out keys and unlocking the door manually so the lights didn't alert anything to my presence. Before I could get in, I looked across at the burning base and tunnel entrance to see the Greys emerge. The one that had been prisoner was floating alongside the others, levitating out of the tunnel with whatever powers they had used to tear dozens of soldiers apart. As they emerged, the discs began to shine their lights down, beaming them up into the ships one by one. Just to be safe, I ducked down in my seat and waited to see if they would leave. After the last Grey was picked up, the discs fired off a few more lasers before rising further into the sky, suddenly blinking out and disappearing completely. As they left, a laser suddenly hit the R&D building, causing it to explode and hit me with a blast of heat. That was the last thing I needed to tell me that this wasn't the place to be. Turning the key, I threw it into drive and hit the gas, nearly smashing into another car when it lurched forward. I steered around it, hitting the road and flooring the pedal towards the entrance. The guard arm was down, but I smashed straight through it, unwilling to wait for it to raise. Not like there was still law guard at the gate to raise it anyway. The flames were in my rear view for almost 20 minutes, burning into the night sky as I drove as far away as I fucking could. I came home, surprised a cop didn't pull me over for speeding. At some point a bunch of fire trucks passed me, heading towards the base to deal with the chaos I had left behind. About 6 hours ago I walked in the door of my apartment and haven't looked back. Typing this up just seems silly now, considering all that I've gone through in the past 12 hours. I've been looking out my window every 5 minutes, waiting to see black vans roll up ready to cart me off to some black site where I'll never be heard from again. I don't think I'll be lucky enough to have some aliens come break me out if they do take me, but goddamn it, they're real. They're out there. We are not alone. If this country is smart, they won't try picking any more fights with them.